Good afternoon. Your votes have already led to power changing hands in astonishing ways. And the trickle of results in these sets of election is about to become a flood. It's Reform UK that's been celebrating across England so far, whether in Newcastle under Lyme or Havering on the eastern edge of London. Currently, they're up more than 500 seats. Nigel Farage has said this is a truly historic shift, and that he's wiping out Labour in their traditional areas. But in the English council elections, there is plenty of counting still going on. So far, though, the results have meant misery for Sir Keir Starmer, losing councils north, south, east and west. But already today, he said he will not walk away. And so far, only a small number of his critics have said publicly he should be for the chop. Anger with Labour has not, though, benefited the Conservatives. Despite snatching back the iconic Council of Westminster, Kemi Badenoch's party is down overall. And it is Zach Polanski's Greens and Sir Ed Davies' Liberal Democrats who've both been marching forwards. Both parties gaining seats overnight, and both of them with still some of their best targets still in play.
Here in Wales, we're expecting the first results in the next hour or so, with Labour admitting it has been a bad election. Turnout, by all accounts, is predicted to be over 50%. That's the first time we've had that in a Senate election. Plaid and Reform are the ones expected to do well.
Here at Holyrood, the Scottish parliamentary election results are really getting going now. We have 7 out of 73 constituencies, and 56 MSPs will be selected by the list system. But so far, the first SNP win for the Liberal Democrats in Shetland, the first time there hasn't been a Liberal in the Northern Isles since 1950, and there's a by-election ahead in Dundee East as SNP Stephen Gethin leaves Westminster for Holyrood.
And I'm here at the giant screen, crunching the numbers behind these big changes in British politics.
And your votes matter, deciding who will be in charge of the services that millions rely on. But they're also a vital barometer of what voters really think of the UK government overall. And the message so far, it's not up to much. One of our best political brains at the BBC, Vicky Young, will be with us this afternoon as the story evolves in the next few hours. And of course, Professor Sir John Curtis's analysis of all of the numbers will pick out the patterns of exactly what is going on. So stay with us for Election 2026 across the BBC as millions of your votes sketch out what could be a very different political world. A warm welcome back to you all. We'll be here with you until 5 o'clock, poised for swathes of results to come streaming in the next couple of hours. The tally in England so far looks bleak for Labour. You can see there, Reform, Nigel Farage's party gaining 569 seats. The Lib Dems, 339. Tories on 316, but Labour only on 296. Plenty of results will be coming in England in the next couple of hours, but the future of the Scottish Parliament and the Welsh Senate might give us historic headlines this afternoon too. Clive, an incredible afternoon. What are you expecting next?
Yeah, hi there. Senior Labour figures, they're telling us that they're convinced that they've lost control of the building behind me, the Senate, that this has been a bad election. And that'll be the first time that's happened since devolution back in 1999. Turnout, by all accounts, has been over 50% for the first time in a Senate election, which is really important because that, of course, shows the level of engagement that there's been among the electorate here. And that makes it clear that people want change, and it's been difficult perhaps for Labour, who've been in power for so long, to come across as the party who can deliver the kind of change that voters have wanted. Who's going to benefit from this? Clearly it will be the progressive left, with Plaid on the left and Reform on the right. And we're hearing from multiple sources telling us that the First Minister of Wales, Eluned Morgan, has not been able, apparently, not being able to secure one of the 6 seats available in her constituency, Ceredigion-Penfro, in West Wales. Now remember, it's a proportional system here. To get one of those seats, you need at least 10, 12 percentage points when it comes to the share of the vote. If Labour aren't able to do that with the First Minister, then you know this is going to be a complete blowout for the Labour Party here in Wales as a result of events today. Kirsty in Scotland.
Well, things are really hotting up, and I think we can see Anna Sarwar, the Scottish Labour leader, is arriving at the count in Glasgow. And of course, all the conversation this morning has been about, for example, perhaps Reform beating Labour, coming ahead of Labour. And does that give succor to Anna Sarwar's call for Keir Starmer to go, a call he issued in February? You know, the Cabinet's been tight-lipped this morning, but certainly Anna Sarwar has not demurred from that position, that it is time now for Keir Starmer to go, because on the doorsteps, what he's getting is disaffection with what's happening at UK government level, rather actually than things within the purview of the Scottish Parliament. There he is, looking buoyant, but actually in Glasgow, we don't know yet whether or not the SNP will lose to Labour, but we certainly know that there are issues, and we will be discussing them this afternoon. Now back to you, Laura.
Much indeed, so much at stake and so much for us to talk about. Let's just look into those, some of the outcomes of overnight, which is Labour getting pasted across England, largely at the hands of Reform, Vicky, although the Greens have also been taking from them too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the Labour losses is obviously the story overnight, and I think it's the scale of them, not just in England, but if it happens in Wales as well, that is what is going to really affect people. And you think about cabinet ministers looking at their patch. The council may not have even changed hands. It might be that Labour still run the council, but within that, there might be dozens of councillors who've lost their seats. In some places, Labour not even being able to defend a single one of the seats that they had previously. So that is going to have an impact. It does mean sometimes, of course, that local services will change, that different people will be running your council, but you can't get away from the knock-on effect. How do Labour MPs analyse what's gone wrong? Who do they blame? What, if anything, are they going to do about it? So the questions about Keir Starmer will start.
And what at this stage is your sense of that? I mean, so far there has been the odd MP popping their head up over the parapet, but at this stage it doesn't appear, and it's still not done, it doesn't appear that they're suddenly going to crash into the kind of leadership chaos that Keir Starmer's been trying to keep at bay for a long time.
Yeah, and I think even though there are many people who I've spoken to who've been knocking on the doors who say that it is partly, at least, Keir Starmer's leadership that is the problem for many voters, it needs the cabinet to move against him. That's crucially what has to happen. There has to be a challenger. The people who don't want Keir Starmer there also don't quite know who they might get if it becomes an open contest. So it's a long way from that, but there is no doubt that this will be, very unsettling for a number of Labour MPs looking in areas where they used to be rock solid and wondering what on earth's going to happen. Reform the big winners overnight, as you say. Still lots of results to come in. The Greens hoping to do well as well.
OK, and the sequencing of these results is always a big part of the story. So the Lib Dems and the Greens still some of their best targets ahead. Let's, though, look in detail with Rita at some of what's happened under the bonnet in some of those parts of the country where Labour, for a long time, might have thought they were on safe ground. Not anymore.
Absolutely, Laura. We're getting results coming in thick and fast now. This is Hyndburn in Lancashire, next door to Blackburn over here, and Blackburn Labour has lost control of. It's lost control of Hyndburn as well. It only gained control of the council here and also gained an MP in 2024. So you can see how quickly it's lost support in this area. So it's still the largest party on 17 seats, Conservative and Reform both on 8 seats. But come over here and see the change since 2022, last time these seats were fought. And you can see it's Reform that are the big winners here, gaining 8 seats at the expense of Labour and the Conservatives. Let me show you one more Labour loss, because at the moment this is the story of these elections. Cannock Chase. Now, this was one of Labour's most marginal councils. It only had a majority of 2 last time. Anyway, it's lost that majority. It's no longer in control of Cannock Chase. Cannock Chase in Staffordshire. They are short by 5 seats for controlling Cannock Chase. So this is, again, what we call a hung council. You can see there it's Reform here that have got the highest number of seats on 14, with Labour in second place. Let's look at the change since 2024, and a very similar pattern. Reform on 13 and Labour the big losers here. Let's take a look at the scoreboard, as we like to call it, the state of the parties in the English councils in terms of number of councillors, and we've got 27% of the seats declared, so about a quarter of them. Still many, many more to come. This is the order of winners, if you like, with Reform UK right at the top. On 577, the Lib Dems, they've gained 30 with 345. The big losers are the Conservatives. As you can see, Kemi Badenoch's down 261 seats, and that is a rate of attrition of about 45%. They're losing 45% of all the seats that they hold. It's a worse story for Labour. Have a look over here. You can see that Labour has lost 393 and hung on to or gained 299. So that is it. They're losing more than half of all the seats that they have. But I can tell you, actually, that behind those figures, Labour is doing much, much worse outside London than it is in London. And the Greens here, a word for them, up 64 on 116 seats. So that's how the picture is, with about a quarter of the results.
There's still tons to come, but Rita, it's the stage, isn't it, in a council election? Just because seats sometimes fall away, that doesn't necessarily mean that lots of town halls dramatically change hands. So it's just one thing to keep in our minds as we go through the afternoon. Thank you very much indeed for now. Let's take you then to Birmingham, where one of the biggest councils in the country is counting. It's been a very interesting race there, and Richard Tice, Reform's deputy leader, is there this afternoon. It seems only a few hours ago since we were speaking to you from Staffordshire, Mr. Tice. Welcome to the programme again. What are your hopes there of Birmingham?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. What are your hopes there in Birmingham for Reform?
Well, this is actually the biggest council, I believe, across the whole of Europe, and it's incredibly close. We always knew that it would be. It's way, way too close to call. This will go on through until the evening. And in a sense, for us, we would love to be the largest party, of course, but it's just too close to call. Very thin margins, and results are being announced every couple of minutes. Behind me, you may be able to hear. But across the West Midlands, as we touched on in the middle of the night, Laura, we're achieving great things. We won control of Newcastle-under-Lyme. Cannock Chase, you were just touching on earlier. Nuneaton, we've done brilliantly. Tamworth, we've done brilliantly. And I think we're very optimistic down in Coventry and indeed elsewhere.
And we can see as we're talking, we're just showing people the vote share so far. I'm just going to take you straight to the declaration, in fact, in Perth, where the First Minister, John Swinney, is standing. The declaration there is very imminent. You can see the Scottish First Minister on the left of the stage.
2,240. Murdo Fraser, Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, 10,171. Claire McLaren, Scottish Liberal Democrats, 2,741. Kenneth Morton, Reform UK, 4,620. And John Ramsay Swinney, Scottish National Party, 16,414. Additionally, the number of ballot papers rejected was 158, 22 voting for more candidates than entitled to, and 136 being unmarked or wholly void.
Minister's sixth win in this seat. You can see there that John Swinney has 16,414 votes. The Conservative Murdo Fraser, 10,171. Reform in third place with 4,620. Liberal Democrats on 7,000 2,741, and Labour on 2,240. So his majority is 6,248. So his majority is up.
Pleasant and first duty as the elected member of the Scottish Parliament for Perthshire North to express my thanks to you and to your team here at Dewar Centre and throughout the county yesterday for the efficient way in which this election campaign and election contest has been conducted and for the efficiency of the declaration today. Can I also express my thanks to Police Scotland for, as ever, providing the important security around the democratic process upon which we all enjoy. It has been the privilege of my life to serve the people of Perthshire for the last 29 years, and I look forward to continuing that service in the next Scottish parliamentary term. I have always acted in a way to prioritise the service of the people who chose me to represent them in Parliament, and I will continue to do so. And I express my warmest thanks to my constituents for supporting me once again so emphatically in this election today. Can I also express my thanks to the SNP team in Perthshire North, led by my agent Pam Muir, who have, to say the least, run the campaign without me largely in attendance because of the requirement of me to be around the country leading the Scottish National Party campaign. But I could not have achieved this result without the steadfast support of Pam and my team around the constituency. So to each and every one of you who've worked so hard for this moment, please savour it and express my warmest and share my warmest thanks for all that you have achieved on behalf of the Scottish National Party in Perthshire North. Thank you very much.
And that is John Swinney accepting the result. And interestingly, that is an increase in his majority of around 2,000 on a higher than average turnout of 58%. So he is speaking there and thanking people in the constituency. But that, interestingly, Brian Taylor,
because
let's listen a bit more
life to serving the people of Scotland through the activities of the Scottish National Party, to have assumed the leadership of my party 2 years ago and to take it to the position where I expect us to win the election today is a moment of enormous, enormous significance for me, and one from which I take enormous personal assurance and joy of the commitment that we've given to the people of Scotland, that they have rewarded us in the way that it appears they are rewarding us tonight and today. So to the people of Scotland, I express my warmest thanks for their support in this election campaign, and I look forward to following the results in the remainder of today and seeing more later on today. But I promised during this election campaign that I would devote my life to the service of this country, and I'm profoundly grateful to the people of Scotland for indicating that they wish that to continue in the years to come. I will simply do all that I possibly can do to make Scotland a successful country and to improve the lives of the people of our country, and I look forward to doing that in the next Scottish parliamentary term. Thank you very much.
So that is the first but not the last time I think we'll hear from John Swinney today. And look at the state of the parties now. SNP has 7, that is 1 more. Liberal Democrats have lost that one, that was Shetland. Labour still on 0, Reform on 0, Conservatives on 0, and 9 on 0. But a lot more to come because 8 of 129 seats are declared. Brian Taylor.
Good result for John Swinney. Congratulations to him. The reason I would guess for the increase in majority is not so much the SNP. Their vote actually slipped slightly as a share. It would be that the Reform vote has come from nowhere and eaten into Murdo Fraser, who is an MSP on the list, standing as the Conservative candidate in this constituency. Intriguing that Mr Swinney is prepared to say that he is expecting us, the SNP, to win the election today. That is a pretty widespread expectation, it has to be said, not least because they picked up that seat in Shetland. The anxiety that remains for the SNP is over a couple of seats. It's over Edinburgh Central. They look like losing. Angus Robertson looks like losing. If he does, is there an opportunity for him to continue a political career by going back to Westminster through one of the 2 by-elections that may be created, certainly a by-election in Stephen Gethin's seat of Arbroath, and Rory Ferry, possibly in the North East seat that Stephen Flynn is hoping to leave to go to the Scottish Parliament. Other anxiety for the SNP on a day that looks like being a return to power. Other anxiety for the SNP, some seats in Glasgow. Glasgow South Side, Nicola Sturgeon's constituency, a bit of a worry there over the Greens. Glasgow Kelvin, worry over the Greens. Glasgow Maryhill, worry over challenging parties elsewhere. Gossip from the party is that they might hold on to these, but the gossip from the party is also Edinburgh Central gone, finished, out.
So, but then we come to the real business of the day would be that, of course, they will likely be the administration, but it will all be about deal making.
Yeah, now this is it. Now the thing is to bear in mind, to be a First Minister in that building behind us there, let's never forget, to be a First Minister you have to, first of all, your party has to win the popular vote. You then have to win a conferring vote in Parliament, in the chamber over there behind me, of your fellow MSPs. You then have to stay in power by sustaining the confidence of that Parliament behind me there. You might need the Greens to get the conferring vote and the Liberal Democrats to stay in power with the budget deal.
Well, let's now go to David Wallace-Lockhart, who's got looking at the state of Scotland.
Well, Kirsty, here's our constituency map of Scotland. Still a lot to fill in. That big blob of SNP yellow in the middle is where John Swinney has just kept his Perthshire seat. Now, we'll spend a bit of time today looking at this map, but we also have this different map that we call the Hex map, which paints the picture a bit clearer because it distorts the geography but shows every Scottish constituency as being the same size. The outline of each hexagon is whoever held the seat in 2021. So we'll be filling that out throughout the day. We're going to look at a few interesting seats. Some have declared, some haven't. First up, that one Brian Taylor was just talking about, Edinburgh Central. It's currently held by the SNP Cabinet Minister Angus Robertson, but the Greens seem to think that they have taken it. We've not had the declaration yet, but they're sounding confident. Big moment for them because that would be the first constituency the Greens have ever taken in a Scottish Parliament election. Now, a seat that has declared, actually the most interesting seat so far, I think it's fair to say, I'm going to have to go to the far north of Scotland, all the way into our Holyrood chamber here to get next to Shetland. Shetland has been Lib Dem since 1999, often taken as a given that Shetland will vote Lib Dem. Not anymore. The SNP have won the seat. Hannah Mary Goodlad has won it by a decent majority, actually. And if we have a look at the change in share here, we can see SNP up, Lib Dem's quite considerably down. The Greens up, Reform up. Yet to see if that's a theme, the Greens and Reform performing better, that we'll see throughout this election. Shetland's not your typical constituency, but we should keep an eye on that. With that in mind, let's actually go to Banffshire and Buchan Coast. This is the area that Reform UK think they're in with their best chance at winning a constituency. They plan to pick up most of their seats via the regional list. But here, their candidate Conrad Ritchie hoping to take a constituency. Karen Adam for the SNP has a narrow majority. But we should be saying, I've been speaking to some people in the SNP who now think that they have managed to hold on to this seat. We should be hearing about it quite shortly. What we don't know a lot about is how Labour have really done yet, because we're still waiting to hear for a lot of those central belt of Scotland seats. But I think from what we're hearing from Labour is that they do not think this has been a particularly positive election for them. So we will keep filling in both our hex maps and this map as the results come in, but definitely some interesting ones so far and definitely some interesting results to keep looking out for.
Thank you very much. Now, John Curtis, look at whether or not the SNP is likely to reach that magic number of 65 MSPs, which would be an outright majority.
Well, we are doing our best on the moment. It's only 8 constituencies, and there's obviously been a lot of variation, and nobody would claim that the 2 constituencies in the Northern Isles are necessarily representative of Scotland. That said, it's clear that SNP support in general is down. In some cases, down by 10, 11, 12 points. And Labour support is not down. Labour are basically hanging on to their support. And Conservative support has not fallen away that dramatically so far. So the honest truth is, at the moment, we reckon that there isn't much chance of the SNP getting an overall majority. And it sounds, though, from what you're saying at your end, that the SNP are of that opinion as well. So it's too early for us to actually call it and say that's definitely what's going to happen. But certainly the direction of travel seems to be, the SNP being the dominant party in the next parliament may well indeed not be that far short of the 64 that they got back in 2021. But it does seem, as is frankly has always seemed the case, the 65 is a tall order unless everything were to go their own way.
And very quick word on Anna Sarwar, who's just said, we made the argument for change, ultimately an argument that we lost. Scottish Labour leader.
The problem that Anna Sarwar faced in trying to persuade people to focus on the record of the SNP government as a way of winning votes is, if you look at the attitudes of those people who voted for the SNP in 2024, much diminished in number as they were as compared with 2021, they on balance were saying that the SNP was doing a good job, and they said, yeah, that's what we're voting on. So the truth is, it was never clear that Anna Sarwar was going to crack the SNP nut by simply attacking the competence of the SNP government.
Laura.
Thank you very much indeed, Kirsty, and such an interesting picture there. A huge achievement for John Swinney after the chaos in the SNP in the last couple of years, for him to come in, steady the ship and then win in that way, but seeming to fall short of a majority. Let's show you what is happening around the country, because tellers are beavering away, still counting votes. This is Cambridge, where we will expect a result at some point this afternoon. But interesting, in lots of parts of the country, turnout has been up. So in some places, counts have taken longer than they normally would have done. This is Sandwell in the Midlands, where Labour are trying to hold on, but under pressure, like in so many parts of the country, and not too far from Birmingham, that huge mega council. We were hearing from Richard Tice, Reform's deputy leader, not long ago. They're hopeful of picking up some seats there. But there's a very strong potential showing from independents in Birmingham. And the result of that council, one of the biggest in the country, is incredibly difficult to predict. And just look at the sheer numbers of people there in that huge arena. A genuine reflection of the size of the council and the complexity of the potential outcome there might be a real headache for all of the political parties, not least because they're still trying to sort out a bin strike that has been going on and on and on. Rita, talking of complexity, give us some more pieces of the jigsaw in England.
I'm going to give you a couple of results that have come in, different parts of the country, different sorts of councils as well. Let me take you first of all to Suffolk. We call this the big shout. This is a big new result in. It's a Reform gain. This is the second county council that Reform have gained. They gained Essex a few hours ago, and they've gained this council from the Conservatives. Now, there are 6 county councils that have been up for election this time round. They've been delayed by a year, and they were all last fought in 2021 during the time when the Conservatives were riding quite high in the polls. Things are so different now. So look at the new composition of Suffolk County Council. So it's Reform by far and away the biggest party there with 41 seats. The Greens in second place with 13. And this is the change since 2021. So Reform has just come in from nowhere and won 41 seats at the huge expense of the Conservatives, who've lost 40 seats. OK, so that's Suffolk. Let's go now to Manchester. Very different sort of council in the north of England, of course. Now, this is a Labour hold, but it's the detail that's so interesting, because Manchester has been Labour for eons. But you can see now that although Labour are still by far and away the largest party on the council, the change is always so interesting, isn't it? And the change since last time these seats were fought is that Labour has lost 24 seats, and it's the Greens who've particularly benefited. They've gained 17 and Reform has gained 7. And look at the vote share here. The Greens with a handsome lead over Labour on 30%, 37%, I beg your pardon, of the vote share. Labour on 31%. And this tells the story in a different way. Labour have plummeted by 35% of the share of the vote since last time round 4 years ago. And it's the Greens and also Reform who have benefited. I want to show you one more screen, because we've got a fair amount of data in now. We've got 30% of the English council seats declared. Now, this map shows you the number of councillors of the main parties going back the last 20 years. So you can see we're starting back here in the Blair years, the Brown years, the Cameron years, and you can see that for quite some time it was the Conservatives who were the main party of English local government. And you also see this graph, which we're not looking at anymore because it was only 3 parties who were on the graph. Then suddenly Down here in 2022, you've got the Greens appearing. And then I don't know if you can see the Reform line here, just under the Greens, 2025, and you've got their share of the vote shooting up. Now, we are estimating that if the pattern of support continues in the same way as it has done up till now, that Labour will be in the region of losing around 1,400 or potentially 1,500 of their councillors. So a really bad night for Labour. The Conservatives, again, if these patterns continue, well, are looking at a loss of around 600 seats. The Lib Dems up 92. Reform, the big gainers on around 1,800 seats, and the Greens up on 200. So that is on the basis of about a third of all the seats declared. And as I have to stress, it depends on what the pattern of support is going to be. So we can't totally call it. But at the moment, if it continues in that vein, those are the sort of figures that we're looking at, Laura.
Thanks, Rita. And still lots, but in particular, lots and lots of seats in London still to come, which, of course, has been a sort of Labour fortress. Although Labour people are watching right now might look, Vicky Young, at those graphs showing the Greens having the biggest share of the vote very clearly in Manchester, somewhere where Labour, you know, would really normally have thought that they would be miles ahead. Popular local leader with Andy Burnham. Where do you think the anxiety will be coming from for the Labour Party this afternoon?
I mean, I think that's the point you're making. It's coming from all directions, isn't it? I mean, they're looking in some places and then they're seeing the Greens eating into that vote. And it might not be having the headline effect. You know, Labour could never lose Manchester because only a third of the seats are up for grabs. But if you're an MP in that area and you're seeing almost every seat going to the Greens, that's going to make you, think, isn't it? And then you're in a different part of the country and you can see that Reform is encroaching on your vote. And it is about what they decide to do about it. Do they decide that it's the policies that are the problem? That's what some people think. Do they think it is Keir Starmer that's the only problem? How do they go about reversing this, changing this? Who decides to act? Do they decide to act? What path are they going to take? And I think that is the great unknown. And until the Cabinet decide what they're going to do about it, it's hard to know. But, Keir Starmer's already said, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to lead the party into the next general election. But looking at some of these figures, can they be written off as a protest vote? There'll be lots of Labour figures feeling that, they can't. They'll be looking at Reform and saying, well, they're winning in lots and lots of different parts of the country. The Greens are also encroaching. We need to do something pretty drastic.
We will see. Vicky, thanks for now.
Well, we were expecting our first results here in Wales about half an hour ago from the Blaenau Gwent Caerphilly constituency, but we understand that has now gone to a recount and there were just 111 votes in it for the 6th seat in that constituency. You're seeing pictures there from Newport, the Casnawyth Islwyn constituency there in south-east Wales. That's where Dan Thomas, former Tory councillor for Barnet for 20 years, is actually standing for Reform now. And I mentioned a little earlier, multiple sources suggesting to us that the First Minister, Eluned Morgan, could be in trouble in her constituency of Ceredigion Penfro in West Wales. To discuss a little bit of this, Dr. Anwen Elias is with me, co-director of the Centre for Welsh Politics and Society. Just from what I've said over the last 30 seconds or so, that suggests it's going to be not just a blowout for Labour, completely appalling for Labour.
We knew it wasn't going to be a good election for Labour, but the signs now coming through are that it might even be worse than had been expected. Eluned Morgan failing to get a seat would be a terrible result. The closeness of the result, it would seem, in Blaenau Gwent Caerphilly Rhymney, the recount there. So indications that this is really turning out to be a terrible election for Welsh Labour.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the fact that this is a proportional system now, it's 6 seats available in each of the 16 super constituencies. If Eluned Morgan is unable to get the 6th seat with a percentage of, 10, 12%, that's appalling.
Well, again, it suggests that their percentage of the vote is even lower than the polls had been suggesting. So we might be looking at a result for Welsh Labour which might not even put it as the third largest party in the Senedd, which is incredible considering the historical context of Welsh Labour dominance in Welsh politics.
Some senior figures in Labour have been speaking to us overnight and into today, making it clear that they know it's going to be a bad election for them. One senior figure told us that they made it clear to the Labour leadership at Westminster that it was going to be bad. This is a year, 18 months ago. And the suggestion is that they didn't do anything about it, or at least showed a level of complacency that's probably led to today.
And I think that's indicative of what we know about the relationships between Welsh Labour and the UK Labour Party. They haven't been great, and there have been tensions since UK Labour have been in government in Westminster, and we know that relationship has been strained. And so it suggests that, again, in terms of understanding the state of Welsh Labour's electoral support in Wales, there were things that were not taken seriously, and it raises the question, what could have been done to stave off this seemingly terrible result?
Yeah, we're waiting for the results to come in, as I say, but we can go to the count where the First Minister, Eluned Morgan, is standing. This is in Ceredigion, and our reporter, Cemlyn Davies, is there for us. Cemlyn, what are you hearing in relation to this?
Yes, Clive. Well, it's about an hour or so since we broke the news that multiple sources had been telling us here at the count in Llandysul that the First Minister was likely to lose her seat. And since then, that speculation has just grown and grown, and it does seem now inevitable that she will not be re-elected. We're still waiting for Eluned Morgan to arrive here, incidentally. She's making her way from the second count that's taking place in this constituency down in Haverfordwest in Pembrokeshire. But this count, this location, Llandysul, is where the declaration will take place. Now, the counting process here has finished. That's why you're seeing some of the candidates, some of the supporters and activists sat here behind me. We're waiting now for the count in Haverfordwest to be completed and for that information to be passed on to here before the figures are all put through the mathematical formula that's used to decide how the seats will be distributed. We're told that that could all begin to take place in about 45 minutes, and then, assuming that there's no challenge from any of the parties, well, we'll get the declaration, the actual confirmation soon after that. But as I say, the expectation now, certainly here, is that Eluned Morgan, the First Minister of Wales, will not be re-elected, Clive.
OK, so Cemlyn, let's just get this straight. 6 seats on offer in these huge constituencies now, 16 down from 40. 6 seats on offer. Does that suggest... Oh, I'm sorry, we're going to have to go to a declaration in Scotland.
The total number of votes cast in the election is as follows. With an electorate of 61,536, total votes cast of 29,574, giving us a turnout of 48.06%. The votes cast for each candidate in the said election was as follows. Karen Adam, Scottish National Party, 10,374. James Adams, Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, 6,348. NDR McClellan, Independent, 555. Brooke Ritchie, Scottish Labour Party, 1,049. Conrad Strachan Ritchie, Reform UK, 10,010. Leslie Tarr, Scottish Liberal Democrats, 1,162. In terms of rejected votes, 7 votes were rejected for voting for more than one candidate, 1 for writing on mark by which vote could be identified, none for a lack of official mark or unique
This seat of Bamshire and Buchan Coast was the big big target for Reform if they were going to return a constituency MP, and the SNP's Karen Adam has absolutely scraped home with a majority of 364 on a low turnout of 48%. So they've hung on there. That's an incredibly important win for Bamford Buchan. And looking at that now, you see that Conrad Ritchie was absolutely snapping at her heels. The reason that that was the likely win for Reform was because that is the most Brexit-leaning constituency at the time that we left the European Union. Brian, I mean, that's a scrape home for
it
the
is,
SNP.
it really
But it's a win.
It's a win. A win is a win. I always test people by saying, do you remember who came second? In such and such? They say,
well, this time we will, because it was Reform.
You will, it was Reform. But name that candidate, name that tune. 364 as against 730 last time. It was tight already. Often in Scotland, the constituencies are defined by the question of the referendum of 2014. Where were you in 2014? This constituency, because it contains Peterhead and Fraserburgh, huge fishing ports, the biggest fishing ports, whitefish ports in Europe. Because of that, it is defined by the referendum of 2016, when the fishing industry was absolutely desperate to leave the European Union. Not
so much now.
So keen now, but that's a different matter. But that still polarises opinion there. Reform really were hopeful of taking this seat. They have come close. They have come oh so close, but they've come second.
Emily, your take on it?
I mean, what this underlines, I think, is how that right-wing vote has split in some of these constituencies in the northeast, and essentially, this is a seat that the Conservatives would have been in contention for against the SNP last time around. This time, that's really seen the vote fractured between Reform and the Conservatives, and that's let the SNP in.
Laura.
Indeed, Kirsty. Well, one of those results in Scotland that people will remember, Reform losing out there just by a whisker. And we could almost hear the sighs of relief from the SNP all the way from Aberdeen down here in London. Let's bring you some of the results that have just come in England while we've been watching carefully what's happening in Scotland. Preston Council has been lost by Labour to no overall control. So Labour losing there. Preston, another council in the northwest of England that has slipped through their grasp. We can show you the numbers there. Still 4 seats to declare, but Labour on 20, the Lib Dems on 13, Reform with 4, the Tories with 3. Let's look at how seats changed hands, causing Labour to lose grasp there. Labour lost 5 seats. The Lib Dems gained 2, Reform up 4. Let's look at the share of the vote, which sometimes gives a very different picture to the seat tally. Labour on 20%, the Lib Dems, interestingly, in second on 22%. But again, we see Reform there with 28%, so topping the share of the vote there in Preston. Vicky, just a quick word for you. Again, we're seeing Reform topping the share of the vote in a part of the country that Labour would normally feel very secure in, although the Lib Dems have done well in that particular council in recent years.
Yeah, they do have some presence in that area, don't they? But I mean, this is, again, Reform doing well, against Labour in those kind of seats, people turning to them there, but also against the Conservatives. And that's the other story, isn't it? That the Conservatives are also doing quite badly, not as badly as Labour in places like this, but Reform are, taking from both in all parts of the country, and that is what allowing them to say we are truly the only national party across the whole of Great Britain, which some of the others would say they can't do. But as John Curtis has been saying, there is a correlation between that Brexit vote and where Reform, not surprisingly, Nigel Farage's party is still doing well.
Well, talk about areas where Brexit was very, very popular and where Labour have now been falling back. Rita, Sunderland, the classic, of course, the first place to declare for leaving the EU all those years ago, 10 years in 2016. And now?
Well, they're still counting, Laura, but actually the initial details are really interesting to look at. So Sunderland has been Labour for 50 years or so. They are usually very quick at counting, but they have got all their seats up. 75 seats, it's a big council, and 18 of those seats have been declared so far. And you can see that this is how it's looking at the moment, with Reform on 15 seats, the Lib Dems on 3, and Labour yet to get on the scoreboard. So this is the change since 2024. And, it's just a straight swipe, isn't it, by Reform from Labour. Reform on 15 seats, Labour down 15 seats. So absolutely one of their rock-solid traditional Labour councils, and they look like they're in trouble. There's a long way to go, of course, but, you know, the initial impression is very striking. I want to show you something about the Labour vote. We've looked at the council results and split them up geographically. North and Midlands, South outside London and London. And let's start over here, North and Midlands, because we've just come from Sunderland. And look what's happened to the Labour vote here. It's down by 25%, so they're losing a quarter of all their support in these areas, in the North and Midlands, and that support is being taken by Reform, and the Greens are coming in as well, Conservatives and Lib Dems down too. Now, in the south outside London, again, a strong Reform performance, but Labour, you'll see actually their support, although it's falling less. It's falling by 14%, matching here the Conservatives. And if I bring you around to London, once again, the Reform rise in the share of the vote it's a rise, but it's smaller. And Labour is losing support at a slower rate. It's just by 12%. So I think this is important to bear in mind because we've got a lot of Labour London results still to come. And whether that then changes the pattern of what we're seeing, it might well do.
Well, we will see, but just in the last couple of minutes, a couple of Labour MPs expressing their real horror about what's going on, writing online. Nadia Whittome, who's an MP on the left of the party, who said that the Prime Minister should announce a timetable for his departure. Also, another MP on the left of the party, Afsana Begum, who's one of the East London MPs, says it's existential for the Labour Party. So the numbers of Labour MPs going public and calling for the Prime Minister to go are still small. We should be clear about that. All the results are not yet in. However, as the minutes tick by, those numbers are ticking up a little by little. Partly, in large part, that's because of how Reform have been doing around the country. In a second, we'll talk to Zia Youssef, who's joined us back here again in the Election 2026 studio. But let's just look at where Reform has been gaining. Suffolk Council is a gain for Reform from the Conservatives. Essex Council is a gain for Reform from the Conservatives. So is Havering on the outskirts of London. Newcastle under Lyme there too. And that takes our total state of the parties in terms of overall bums on seats. Reform on 614 gains so far. 612 gains. The Lib Dems have put on 31 with 391. And you can see there the Conservatives falling away, Labour really falling away too, and the Greens gaining a few. Zia Youssef, thank you for joining us again in the studio. This is piling up to be really quite something for Reform, isn't it?
I think it's already clear this is going to be a historic set of election results in this country. And look, this has never happened before. It's historic because for a start-up insurgent party to be demolishing Labour in some of their heartlands, demolishing the Tories in some of their heartlands, that hasn't happened before. The two-party, we call it the uni party. It's this duopoly.
And they both dispute. We had a very vigorous debate in the early hours of the morning about that.
I'm sure they would dispute it, but the fact of the matter is, look, the two old parties, their duopoly, and this is a fact, of about 100 years in politics in this country, was broken last year, and that has compounded this year. And I think it's clear that the British public are finally seeing a real alternative to those two old parties for the first time, certainly in my lifetime, and more time than that. But also that Reform is now clearly a national party. We're present, competitive in Scotland, with a real chance of being the biggest party in Wales, and obviously, as I said, across England. I mean, there are two things that stood out for me. You look at a place like Wigan, Reform won 24 out of 25 seats. Congratulations to Ed Miliband, where Labour have successfully recorded net zero seats in the heartland of Wigan of 40 years. And obviously a place like Essex, where even in Kemi Badenoch's own constituency, if that sort of result was replicated in a general election, she would lose her seat. So it's historic in so many ways.
I suppose the question, though, as you just raised there, is if this were to be replicated in a general election. So we are a long way away from a general election.
Than we think,
well, who knows? I mean, political predictions in the last few years have been, frankly, a bit of a fool's game. But where do you go from here? I mean, let's just start with what you might expect to gain by the end of today, because I know how carefully you follow all the data. So you mentioned there other councils still up for grabs, and also Scotland and Wales and Birmingham. Where next in your sights?
Well, look, I think we're going to do extremely well. Again, it's really clear we're going to do very well in Birmingham. I think we've got a chance of being the largest party. Look, one thing I'm always loath to do is to preempt results before they come out. I think an important part of democracy is you respect the counts and let those results come in. But if we look at the patterns that we have seen so far, we're certainly, I can tell you, outperforming our internal forecasts.
So at the beginning of this campaign, Nigel Farage actually was pretty candid and said you were hoping for at least 1,000 seats. You are more than 600 up so far. So does 1,000 look like something you could achieve more than?
I think, look, as Nigel said, I think coming into this campaign, I think if we were to win 1,000 seats, again, as a start-up insurgent party that's only been around a handful of years, that would be an outstanding result. You know, let's see what happens.
You have, though, been leading in the national polls for a long time, so you would expect to be doing well.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, again, we are exceeding our internal forecasts in terms of the results that have come out so far. Again, I want to add, I'm never going to be someone who tries to preempt what voters are going to do. We've still got a lot more results to come out, but we've also obviously got Scotland and Wales. And I think this is, again, a really important point. If you think about the evolution in history of British politics, it's historic. The result for Labour is going to be historic in so many ways. Where do we start? Obviously, they've controlled Wales for a century or so. And now we look at what's happening with the Tory party. We're going to cease to be a national political party for the first time in 100 years. I don't see a path back for those two parties. The final point I'll make is that, certainly in my lifetime in politics in this country, either the Tories or Labour would win a general election with in excess of 40% of the vote. I would be shocked if they managed to cobble together 40% between them in these elections.
We're certainly in a very different picture in 2026, although casting ahead to 2029 is tricky. We're just watching the pictures in Bury in northwest England and also in Newport, where there is potentially a declaration sometime soon. But just while we wait for the next results, I mean, Zia Youssef, you are cleaning up very effectively in terms of council seats. But where, in terms of taking town halls, do you expect to win more councils?
I think we will. I think there are some more that we would take control of. Look, there are some slight anomalies. For example, Wigan, the only reason Reform, I think, didn't take control of that council is because not enough seats were up for us to do that. Look, where Reform where it's strongest, I think we've got a good chance of taking control of some more. And where that happens, I think that's going to be a great thing because, Reform will bring a common sense and practical approach.
There are 63 councils where you could, though, take control. I mean, give us a proportion. How many more do you think you might take? 10, 12, 13, 40?
The bad news is I'm not going to indulge in the speculation. The good news is you're not going to have to wait very long to see those results.
OK. Zia Youssef, I mean, it is extraordinary, Vicky, how Reform seems to be cleaning up at the moment.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think, as you say, you've been ahead in the polls for some time, so in some ways it was predicted. Now, there are some of your maybe more churlish opponents who are saying you might be down slightly on share of the vote from last time round.
We have churlish opponents. It's news to me.
Well, they might be. They're not as happy as you are about the success. Does that worry you at all, that you've peaked in some way?
No, well, look, I think a lot of that narrative that you'd heard from a lot of people who are hostile to us about Reform and peak, I think that's already, you can reasonably say that's been decisively proven to be wrong. We shouldn't forget that London is a large component of the elections that are up this year.
And much of that is still yet to come in.
That is yet to come in. But I think the points that people were making there is trying to do a projection which would include London. Look, again, I think if you would look at the results that we're getting today, they are historic already. I think there's more to come. I'm still very confident in what Reform is going to achieve. And look, this isn't just my opinion. This is the British public, these are British voters. We shouldn't forget too, I'm not surprised to see the Tories demolished in a place like Essex where they tried to cancel elections. I think if a ruling party tries to collude with the official opposition to deny 4.5 million people the right to vote, I don't think it should be a particular surprise when British voters turn around and punish them for that.
Well, hang on. People will remember part of the reason that some councils wanted to cancel their own elections is because they're in the middle of a big reorganisation and they're electing people who might only be there for a year. So some people suggested that would be a waste of taxpayers' money and they'd rather have been held off.
If you were to take that to its logical conclusion, then why waste money on elections at all? I mean, any elected politician could find a reason for a programme to not have elections. And by the way, they never put that to the electorate. So I think it was really awful. And had Nigel Farage not led a judicial review into that, they wouldn't have gotten the vote at all.
We're just going to listen into the declaration in Newport.
That the number of votes recorded for each political party and individual candidate is as follows.
Rwyf fi, Beverly Owen, swyddog canlyniadau ar gyfer etholaeth Casnewydd Islwyn yn datgan bod nifer y pleidleisiau a gofynnwyd ar gyfer pob plaid wleidyddol ac ymgeisydd unigol fel y ganlyn.
Caedwadur Cymraeg, Welsh Conservatives.
8,847. 8,847. Green Party, Plaid Werth.
5,898.
5,898.
Heritage Party, Pro-Freedom, Pro-Family, Pro-Life, 349.
Heritage Party, Pro-Freedom, Pro-Family, Pro-Life, 349. Open Party, Plaid Agored.
435.
435. Plaid Cymru, the Party of Wales.
23,069.
23,069. Reform UK Wales.
25,571.
25,571. Welsh Labour, Llafur Cymru.
10,622.
10,622. Welsh Liberal Democrats, Democratiaid Rhyddfrydol Cymru.
2,683.
2,683. Clayton Taran.
224.
And the total number of valid votes cast across Casnewydd Islwyn was 77,698.
So the first result from Wales in these national elections shows Reform coming out on top. 25,571 votes. Plaid Cymru second, 23,069, but Labour beaten into third place. This is a seat that they comfortably won in 2021 with 42% share of the vote. They are now third in this seat, the Conservatives behind them there. Reform, it seems, continuing the trend that we've seen across the border in England, doing incredibly well in this seat. Remember, this is a Labour heartland, an area shaped by high deprivation, child poverty, with an industrial legacy of coal, iron and steel. I think we might be able to bring up the percentage share of the vote hopefully soon, because that will show, here we go, look at that, Reform 33% up, Plaid Cymru as well, and Labour down 14%. So the Labour vote squeezed on both sides, from the left by Plaid Cymru and from the right by Reform. Reform coming out on top. Really quite interesting there. Reform, their change since 2021, as I was suggesting, up 32%, Plaid Cymru 19%, and Labour way down 28%. Dr. Anwen Elias with me here. That is what Labour feared, and now it is coming to pass.
Absolutely. So again, it's confirming what the polls have been telling us. This is a really tight race between Reform and Plaid Cymru, who have both together taken the vote away from Welsh Labour, it would seem. Welsh Labour have done well there to get one seat. The Conservatives will also be happy with getting one seat in that constituency. But the headline news is that the biggest parties in Casnewydd Islwyn are Reform and Plaid Cymru by quite some distance.
Professor Sir John Curtis is suggesting that the turnout overall could be as high across Wales as 53%. It's never breached the 50% barrier. But there are some constituencies where it's been below 50%. That suggests something about who is turning out, never mind where.
Exactly, and that's really important. And what the turnout figures are suggesting is that the places where the turnout is still lower than that 50% threshold are the constituencies which are Labour strongholds, or have been in the past.
They're just staying at home.
They might not be turning out to vote, and they maybe cannot, face voting for either Plaid Cymru or Reform, and so they're choosing not to vote at all.
All right, thank you.
And now we can speak to John Swinney, putative First Minister of Scotland, a leader of the SNP. John Swinney, congratulations. A sixth consecutive win for you in your constituency with an increased majority.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to have been returned to serve the people of Perthshire North, who I've served for the last 29 years, and to do so with an increased majority. And I pledge, as I always have done, to serve the people that elect me and to do it with all of my energy.
We've had 17 seats declared, and in none of these seats has the SNP increased their vote. It has decreased, and we've had two flips. We've had a situation where the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away, because you've won Shetland for the Liberal Democrats, but you've lost the Western Isles to Labour.
There's obviously a mixed pattern of results that are coming out in some of the contests, but the overwhelming pattern is that the SNP is going to end up from this election as the largest party in the Scottish Parliament, and to do so by a very significant margin. And that is an incredible achievement as incumbents. After 19 years in office, the people of Scotland have given us their support and will do so to make us the largest party in the Scottish Parliament. And I will offer myself to be the First Minister of Scotland and to continue to do what I promised to do when I became First Minister 2 years ago, to serve all of the people of Scotland with all of my energy.
It looks though, perhaps by the arithmetic, that you may not reach on your own that magic figure of 65, which gives you a majority. Without an overall majority, presumably your demand for an Indy Ref 2 is weaker.
What I think is going to be clear is that I suspect that out of this election there will be a majority in favour of independence within the membership of the Scottish Parliament. But that's a point we'll get the answer to in the course of today. I set out the means by which we could advance on the constitutional question, and obviously there's a lot of opportunity for us to consider all of the issues that arise out of this election. But I think the key point for me is that the Scottish National Party is going to emerge from this election as the leading party in the Scottish Parliament, which is a huge achievement for my supporters and my teams around the country for all that's been achieved in this election.
Now, one of the primary concerns of voters leading up to this election was not whether or not Scotland was independent, but the cost of living crisis. Are these things you're going to have to attend to first, given that ultimately you might want independence, but ultimately the people of Scotland might not find that as their priority right now?
What I focused on in this election campaign was a commitment to continue the improvements in the National Health Service, to provide practical help with people on the cost of living, and to ensure that Scotland has a choice about Scotland's constitutional future. So I recognised all the way through this election campaign the hurt and the suffering of people because of the cost of living pressures. And if we're fortunate enough to form a government in the aftermath of this election, we will prioritise acting to deliver the support that people need in the cost of living challenges that they face.
John Swinney, First Minister. It's Laura here in London. If, as it appears, as John Curtis is predicting, that you don't make it to an overall majority, it seems that's incredibly unlikely now, unless something very strange happens in the hours to come. Will you say openly now that you will not pursue the chance of having another independence referendum?
Well, I'll wait and see what the outcome of the election is and to see what the final tally is from the election contest. But what I'm pleased about is that the Scottish National Party is emerging as by far the leading party in Scottish politics, which is a huge achievement after 19 years in office. And I look forward to offering myself to serve the people of Scotland in the parliamentary term to come.
But you know that voters will be listening very carefully to you now, that if that majority does not come your way. You said clearly in the campaign if there was a majority you would pursue a referendum. It looks like that's not going to be the case. So will you stand good by that vow that you made to people? If the majority is not there, you won't reopen the constitutional question?
People know that I'm a supporter of Scottish independence. It's what is at the heart of my political objectives. So we will carefully consider the outcome of the election and set out to people what steps that we will take. But we must first wait for the outcome of the election. But what we can say at this moment with certainty is the SNP is in the leading position and will be the leading party by a considerable distance when it comes to the conclusion of this election campaign.
Let's just look, as we speak, First Minister, again at the state of the parties and the constituency vote share in Scotland, because we can see how that has changed. The SNP so far, very much the major party, as you've been saying, First Minister, at 41%, but falling away by 7%, which is interesting. Labour back on 19%, Reform hard on their heels at 16%, the Conservatives 14%, falling away by 11%. Now, there is only 17 of the 73 constituencies declared, but if you are short of that majority, would you propose to try and work again with the Greens in government, or would you rather go at your own?
I think my view has always been that there needs to be cooperation amongst political parties in the Scottish Parliament, whether there's a majority situation or not. The one point I've made during the election campaign about the limits of my cooperation is that I won't in any way, shape or form collaborate with Reform, because I have fundamental disagreements with Reform about their priorities and their agenda. So that is, we will engage constructively in the aftermath of this election campaign with other parties, regardless of the outcome. But I establish a very firm position that I will not be cooperating, collaborating with Reform in the aftermath of the election results today.
OK, John Swinney, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I don't know how much sleep you've had, but we're pleased to have you with us on election 2026. People are still very busy around the country. We can show you what's happening in Sandwell in the Midlands, where the counting is underway. You can see there the bundle starting to build up on the desk, but I'm not sure if it looks like it's reaching a conclusion. Let's go then to Cambridge, where the picture is also evolving. All sorts of different battles. Now, that looks, to my eyes, like people are perhaps finished one round of counting and waiting for the overall bundling of the votes. But we will see. As soon as there are results, we will bring you them. The northwest of England, we've already spent a long time talking about, is one of those parts of the country where Labour's had a very rough ride. But Kevin Fitzpatrick's in Bury for us, also in Greater Manchester, and something a bit different happening there.
Yeah, it's really interesting down here. I spent the night at Tameside and then reporting on the results from Wigan and Salford, where it's just a whitewash for Labour, with Reform sweeping them away in real Labour strongholds. But Bury's been a council that has been on a knife edge over the years, really, and this was one of the ones where, if things went against Labour, there was some concern in Labour circles that they could lose full control here. But we now know half the results are in, and that's not going to happen. Labour's vote appears to be holding up here in Bury. In fact, they even gained a seat from the Conservatives. The Workers' Party of Britain have taken one off Labour here, though. And Bury's a place that's become known over the last decade or so for hyper-local parties. And there's a party called Radcliffe First in the north of the area. One of their councillors defected to Reform, and they've won that seat back from Reform today. So not a big result yet here for Reform, as it has been in Greater Manchester. There has been more pain, though, for Labour in Manchester. Early afternoon, all the results are in. Clearly, the Green Party were hoping this was a place where they'd build on the momentum that they gained from getting their first MP in the north of England at the Gorton and Denton by-election. They had 4 councillors going into this set of elections. They were hoping to move into double figures, and they've done that to some tune. They've got 17 new councillors today. That takes them up to 21. The Labour Party overall have lost 24, including a number to Reform, but they've got such a big majority in Manchester that is just a bit of a dent. They will still be able to crack on with full control. And there are other councils doing the count today, up in Rochdale, where that looks like a difficult day for Labour, and Trafford as well. They're facing a real challenge from Reform down there. Now, that used to be known as a Conservative flagship here in the north of England. The Conservatives have been talking up the chances of a bit of a comeback, picking up a few seats there, but again, they face a challenge from Reform down in Trafford as well. So we should be getting results from there pretty soon. We'll get an idea of how the Tories have done there, because in the rest of Greater Manchester, they've just not been in the conversation at all.
Very interesting, Kevin. Thank you so much. You've had so much to keep an eye on in the Northwest. It's been such an important patch as ever, but particularly tonight, all sorts of interesting things happening there. And a good reminder in Bury that actually the overall picture in a region doesn't always come to pass in individual spots. But Kevin mentioned Rochdale. Rita, as if by magic, you've got Rochdale for us. Let's take a look.
Indeed, and we've got a result. I think Kevin said that they were still counting. Well, the results has just come in. A Labour hold in Rochdale. They needed 31 for a majority. There are 18 of the 20 seats declared, but they have got enough. They're far enough ahead for it to be a Labour hold. But as always, it's the change since in the last 4 years that is so interesting. And they have lost 10 seats with Reform picking up 11. And this is the change. This is the vote share this time round. Reform distinctly ahead on 35% as opposed to Labour on 25%. And here's the change since 2022. So Labour losing 20% of the vote that it had 4 years ago. And just a reminder that councils like Rochdale, they're only voting in thirds. So only a third of the seats are up for election, which does mean it's harder for Reform, if it's surging ahead, to actually come in and take the council. So Rochdale, a Labour hold. Let me show you what's going on in Birmingham, where they are still counting, but we have got some results in. So this is a huge council, the biggest in the country, 101 seats, and 26 of those are declared. And as you can see at the moment, Labour and Reform are neck and neck on 6 seats each, the Conservatives on 5, and then 3 apiece for the Lib Dems, the Independents and the Greens. Since last time round, Labour has lost 9 seats, Reform has picked up 6. And the vote share, I think, is really interesting because you can see here this pattern we're getting used to, aren't we, of Reform being in the lead. But actually, all of these 5 parties and the force that are the Independents, there's not that much separating them. And that is a reflection of the politics of Birmingham, which is quite complex, lots of different groups jostling for support. The Independents are strong there, pro-Gaza Independents are strong, and of course they've got this complicating factor of the bin strike that's been going on for so long. So anyway, we're watching Birmingham very closely, as you would imagine. And one more result to bring you that's just come in. Hampshire, which is one of the 6 county councils that has been up for election. All the seats were up for election here, and this is a Conservative loss. The Conservatives short by 13. So here you have it. They are still the largest party, but only just with 27 seats. The Lib Dems on 26 and Reform on 20. And as you can see here, a loss of 29 seats by the Conservatives, and they've been swiped, if you like, by Reform and by the Liberal Democrats. And as you can see here, the vote share is actually, they're all bunched together, aren't they? But it does mean that there's no one party in overall control in Hampshire. So that's how things are looking, Laura.
Rita, thank you very much indeed. I was just looking at all those colours and all those bars and thinking about watching these programmes as a kid when the Swing Operator only had 2 parties. Gone are those days. And here, though, are 3 new guests with us joining us now. Alison Phillips, the former editor of the Mirror newspaper and now Chief Executive of Labour Together, the Labour campaigning group, former Conservative Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, and the Deputy Leader of the Greens, Rachel Millward, is back with us. Welcome to all of you. Alison, let's start with you because this is proving to be a very tricky night for the Labour Party indeed, and we are seeing some pressure coming publicly on the leadership. I just want to bring people what Andrea Egan has just said. She's the leader of the Unison Union, big powerful union. She said Labour faces oblivion. What must change is not just the leader but the entire approach. Now she's a major figure who's got money and power. What do you say to her?
I mean, it has been an incredibly difficult day, and particularly for those candidates that have worked so hard until this point, and it's incredibly painful. I think it's painful for everybody across the whole of the Labour movement. And we all, I think, have to look to ourselves as to how we've got to this point. I don't think it's as simple as the leadership. This is about us looking at what has happened in the last 2 years that we haven't been able, why hasn't Labour been able to make people feel the change that everyone was so invested in, and how can we take from this point and move forwards and try to give people the hope? And in these incredibly uncertain times, there's so much that's changed in the last 2 years, and people have got to start believing there is a plan for that.
Look, people in your own party and prominent people in your own party, like Andrea Egan, aren't believing it either. So how have you got a hope of persuading the public that you're doing the right things for them if prominent people like that don't believe it? We've also seen another statement in the last half hour from another union, Unite, another big, you know, payroll provider for the Labour Party, saying you've got to change or die.
But, I mean, obviously change has to always happen, and I think to get to that point, the work that needs to be done is that really digging into what it is, what are the bold solutions that the country needs, and that's the work that our organisation is doing, that is actually going to affect the change. What further can we offer people so they can feel the change that they've been so desperately hoping and waiting for?
What do you say to people who say that Keir Starmer is part of the problem and people are telling you at the ballot box that they don't like your leader?
I think what it is, though, that the leader is just one bit of the jigsaw puzzle.
Is that part of the problem?
I think it's about looking at what is it that people want from this government. What's the change they want to feel? And I think, obviously, when people are angry about something, it can get directed at a personality, whereas actually, what is the offer to the British public and how are they going to feel it?
But the person who's at the head of that offer also does matter. So are you telling people who say the Prime Minister should set out a timetable, are you telling them
I don't
they're
think
wrong?
I don't think that's the priority today. The priority is, why have we got to this situation where so many people aren't feeling the change, and how do we dig into that? How do we answer those problems, and how do we move forward from there?
Just as we've been talking, there's another result. Labour have lost Cambridge Council control to no overall control, so no one party has enough seats there to form an administration on their own. Just another result coming in for you in England. Kwasi Kwarteng, it's also not a brilliant night. The Conservatives going backwards again.
In some places, but I think...
In a lot of places.
Yeah, but you've got to look at where we were when Kemi Badenoch became leader. And lots of people were saying, actually, this is an existential crisis for the Conservative Party. Today, they're not saying that. They're talking about the Labour Party. So in a way, I think she's performed better than expectations. But yes, you look at where we... the last time we fought these elections, there was very much a two-party system. 4 years ago, we were on about sort of high 30s, as were Labour, and those were when a lot of these seats were fought. So evidently, as our support has gone down in that time, we've now lost seats. But I think the Conservative Party is on a recovery trajectory, and I think Kemi Badenoch has done well.
She's done well when you're losing more than 300 seats and more, probably
I think
likely
relatively,
still to
yeah,
go.
but as I said, a lot of these seats, most of them, were contested 4 years ago when the party had far more support in terms of polling than it does today.
Well, some were contested 2022, some were contested 2021, so it's a mixture.
Yeah, so 21 and 22. In both of those years, our polling was much higher than it is today.
But if you look at the map, because the numbers are vital, but also the map is, if you look at where you've lost Suffolk, Essex Council, Hampshire Council, places where normally they didn't really trouble the Conservatives too much. They were places you could rely on.
And also a lot of these elections were delayed from last year. And last year, we remember Reform did very well in those Tory heartlands. And so this was essentially just a continuation of that. I'm not saying it's a little problem. It's a big problem. But I think Kemi's in a much better place than she was when she started.
And you say that there is a big problem. What is the problem?
Well, clearly, I mean, your viewers should understand this. I mean, today we've got very small political parties. Membership isn't very high. So 40 years ago...
The Greens, we'll talk to you in a second, but the Greens have put on loads of members. Reform's got loads of members. They're both bigger than you now, way bigger than you.
The old parties, the two traditional main parties, are much lower in membership than they were 2 generations ago. And so councillors become very important as foot soldiers, as organisers in local communities. So losing councillors really can damage your ability to win elections on the ground.
Why is that happening? Because people who might have been your natural supporters, who might have joined the party, are not doing that. They're going elsewhere. Why?
Look, you don't need to be particularly perceptive to see that Reform has had an incredible last 2 or 3 years. They've come from a very low point. They're now at about 25%. They have dipped since last year, so I don't think that's a one-way trajectory. But they're popular, and they're banging a populist drum, and so they're winning elections.
Rachel, since we were last speaking, which is quite a lot of hours now, you've now got 86 more seats with the Green Party, picking up in lots of places. I mean, not yet grabbing town halls in the way that you might have hoped, but are you optimistic that may yet happen?
We're optimistic. I'd say also we've massively increased our vote share pretty much everywhere we stood. We've broken through, like, fantastic to win the Mayor of Hackney with such a majority. I mean, to be breaking through in London for us, and we had only 18 councillors there before, there's a 1% of vote share. So it's a massive breakthrough. And we know that, you know, London has been traditionally and increasingly very much a Labour stronghold. So that's a hugely significant change. Manchester's very exciting news. We've just got 17 councillors elected there. That's over our expectations. So we're kind of more than holding well. I think we're up and up. And what we're seeing is, I think it's beyond a problem of just Keir Starmer, is the fact that people are running so hard and barely able to stand still. The fact that the inequality in our economy is just devastating. We're the 5th wealthiest country in the world, but 1 in 3 of our children are living in poverty. That's absolutely real daily reality for people who are struggling. And this Labour government is just not responding to that with enough systemic change. Most things are completely privatised, from our water to our care systems to our highways. This means that there's a few people and corporates making profit out of public services rather than the scale of investment in public services that we would need to make the change that would affect everyone's daily lives.
But I think on that point, I mean, Labour has done some incredible things. I mean, only last week we saw the Renters' Rights Act come in, which can have real impact for people who are living in unsafe conditions and they've been treated badly in the past. We've had the minimum wage increased. We've had sort of opportunities for people in nursery. So that there have been offers there, and there is a real great work has been done to try and protect people.
We did that in government. It's no point saying what brilliant things you've done if the electorate, who are essentially are the ones who are marking your homework.
It's more of a tinkering around the edges. So I'm sure that there are a few ways you've made bits of difference, but we're saying that the whole system really has, and the narrative, I mean, you know, Shabana Mahmood's narrative is about immigration and migrants and the treatment of migrants. It's shifting to the right dramatically. So you're losing the progressive vote, and we're taking that because we're the only people actually speaking truth in those areas.
But the reality is, for Labour to be successful, is that we lead an electoral coalition which appeals to some people on the left, and it appeals to some people on some of those people who are going to reform. And it's finding that way through with bold ideas, with big ideas that you can gather the country around, and with a vision that's going to...
That's the biggest problem you have, because I've never seen local elections like this. And the reason why is because you're leeching votes. You know, we used to lose seats, but we never lost seats on the right and the left in the way that Labour are doing now.
But you are having a catastrophic situation with reform coming through on the right.
There's no point us saying who's doing worse.
So that's
you're in the government. You've lost far more seats.
The point is that we have to look at this. There is a long time until that next election, and there is a lot of work that's going on, and it's working out how we can be bigger, how we can be braver to have that impact on people's lives that they're wanting to hear.
Alison, some people might wonder why Labour didn't work this out when they were in opposition. In 14 years, and you've come in and you're still sitting nearly 2 years in saying, oh, we have to work out what we're really going to do.
But I think that, I think there is definitely a need to have that plan. But also, I think the world has changed, even from where it was 2 years ago. The global insecurity that people are feeling, the idea that there's a technological change that people are feeling anxious about, the idea there hasn't been any increase in living standards in the best part of 2 decades, and all this sort of stuff is there, and people are wanting bigger ideas, braver ideas, and that's what we're hearing.
But it's not just, and also it's the fact that, you know, you said all the great things you've done, but clearly that's not the messages
but those things are
getting to people.
No, but that's the point.
So you have an issue.
We get that message?
Yeah, but you do have an issue. I mean, you're being very loyal, and I've been in your position, and you're not talking about the leader, and clearly the leader is a problem. Clearly, because, I mean, I've been knocking on doors. His name comes up all the time.
OK, we're going to leave it there because I think this is going to be just a warm-up of the kind of debate that we might have a lot of in the next couple of days, not least because of what might happen in Wales. Clive.
Yeah, results beginning to come through, taking a little bit of extra time, it seems, possibly because of the new voting system. It's proportional, it's no longer first past the post, so that might be complicating things. But what we do know from the 2 results is that Labour have not done very well at all. Reform have gained their first elected members of the Senate. Remember that they have had some defections from the Conservatives, but they've managed to gain their first elected members of the Senate, including Dan Thomas, who's the leader of the Reform Party. And Labour, it is not looking good at all. Plaid Cymru are the other side of the coin who have been squeezing the Labour vote. And as you can see there, they've managed to get 4 seats. Reform have 4, the Conservatives 2, and Labour on 2 as well. It is early days. We're still waiting for another, 14 constituencies to come through. But let's get more from Daniel Davies.
Thanks, Clive. If Labour is braced for a difficult day, that certainly seems to be the picture emerging from the first couple of results in the last half hour or so. They began with Casnewydd Islwyn in the south. This is a constituency that includes Wales's second city, Newport. You can see that Reform topped the poll in these new proportional in this new proportional system. There are 6 members for every constituency. Reform has won 2 of those seats. Plaid Cymru 2, 1 for Labour and 1 for the Conservatives. Now, if Reform was going to win anywhere, they would have hoped it would be here because their lead candidate, as you said, is Dan Thomas, their leader in Wales. In his speech at the declaration, he said that people in Casnewydd Islwyn had shown overwhelming faith in Reform. Well, I'm going to show you the share of the result. I don't think it is an overwhelming result for Reform. You can see that Plaid Cymru are not that far behind. So 2 seats each for those 2 parties, 1 for Labour, 1 for the Conservatives. They'll be delighted by that. But Labour, this is a dreadful result. Look at the change in the share of the vote, and you can see their share of the vote is well down. In a part of the world that is one of their heartland seats, or it ought to be, Islwyn is the former constituency of Neil Kinnock. And there was a similar picture in the second seat to declare, Bro Morgannwg, Pen-y-bont Bro Morgannwg. Again, 2 for Reform, 2 for Plaid Cymru. If we can bring the results up, you'll see that it's Plaid Cymru that have topped the poll here. Then Reform, as I say, 2 seats for them each. Again, 1 for the Conservatives and 1 for Labour. And the share of the vote will show you that how close it was at the top. Again, the Reform not very far behind Plaid Cymru, the Conservatives in 3rd and Labour in 4th. So the opinion polls during this campaign have been saying that it's Reform and Plaid Cymru vying for the top spot, Labour being pushed way back down into 3rd place. From the 2 seats we've seen so far, it is very early days, but it does look like that is what is going to happen in Wales.
Yeah, the polls being borne out by the polls that actually do matter. Daniel Davies reporting for us there. Dr. Anwen Elias, the Labour figures, looking at those polls going into this election, knew it was going to be bad. And that was the indication that they gave us overnight, that they would probably lose control of the Senate here. Could anyone have predicted that it would be this bad?
It was difficult because of the new electoral system to know exactly where those votes would go. And in particular, the determination of those 5th and 6th seats we knew would be close. And we knew that if that didn't go Labour's way, then the losses could be even worse than we had imagined. And so we're seeing the effect of that electoral system playing out, it would seem, in the results that we've got so far. So clear strength of Reform and Plaid Cymru, and Labour really struggling to retain any of its vote in these core Labour heartlands.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, big, powerful parties don't tend to want proportional representation. They don't want to open stuff up, and we see that on a UK-wide level in terms of the Westminster vote in national general elections. So why is it that Labour signed on to this?
So Welsh Labour have always been in favour of proportional electoral system. And with the new powers to the Senedd, they were able to do that. When they passed this system, one thing we know about this new proportional system is that it rewards large parties, which at the time when Labour passed this legislation, it was a large party. I don't think it had foreseen being in a position that wouldn't allow it to benefit from this electoral system.
There was opposition, wasn't there? It didn't sail through, did it?
It didn't sail through. Plaid Cymru would have preferred a different kind of proportional system.
Yeah.
In the end, it was a deal that was made within Welsh Labour. There was disagreement within Welsh Labour itself. People within Welsh Labour not supportive of a proportional system. So the use of the closed list system and the Dehont way of attributing votes was a deal that was made within Welsh Labour. And now they are feeling the consequences of no longer being a large party and being punished by a proportional electoral system, which makes it really difficult for smaller parties that doesn't cross this threshold of around about 12–13% of the vote to get seats.
But what about the increase in the number of MSs in the parliament here, going up to 96? I mean, that invites the possibility of other parties getting some of those MSs for themselves.
Absolutely. It opens up the field to more parties being represented in the Senedd and for more parties to do better under a proportional system. So those two things together open up the way for a more diverse Senedd. Now, Welsh Labour's argument has been, proportionality is good for democracy because there is a closer relationship between the percentages of votes and the number of seats. But again, its position in terms of its electoral support has changed so dramatically that it is now not bearing fruit for that party directly.
But what about also the fact that you've gone from 40 constituencies down to 16? That means you've got some quite strange bedfellows. In one constituency, you've got parts of North Powys, sort of leafy, rural, a very different attitude towards some of those people in that new constituency down in Swansea, for instance. This weird mix between urban and rural. Has that made it difficult sometimes for the party?
You are combining geographical areas where the parties have very different bases of support. So you have these not only very big constituencies but very odd constituencies where you are looking at different bases of support, and that's what we are seeing in terms of this really polarisation of the vote that we've seen in the two constituencies declared so far. Plaid Cymru, Reform dominating, but very different parties ideologically, reflecting the different base within those constituencies and the diversion of the vote from Welsh Labour in these two directions.
Very briefly, did the public support the changes?
The public were largely unaware of these changes. It was very much a political decision.
Political decision from above. All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you. Kirsty.
We can now go over to Lindsay Bewes, who is at the Edinburgh count. Lindsay, we will very soon get Edinburgh Central, and the word is that stalwart of the SNP who was actually in charge of the campaign, Angus Robertson, may well have lost his seat. What can you tell us?
Yeah, that's right, Kirsty. We've been watching this seat all day. Edinburgh Central was billed as a three-way contest between the SNP, the Greens and Labour. The Greens have been briefing that they are very confident that they have won that seat. They're all but calling it for their candidate, Lorna Slater, the former co-leader of the party. And this would be very significant for two reasons. Firstly, because it would be a historic win for the Scottish Greens, who have never won a constituency seat before in a Holyrood election. And secondly, because Angus Robertson, as you say, has been the campaign director for the SNP in this election. He's a major figure in the party, sitting in John Swinney's cabinet. He's a very prominent and senior member of the party, so it would be a big blow for the SNP to not see him back in Holyrood. He's in fourth place on the regional list, so his chances really were depending on being elected in the constituency vote. We had at one point thought Angus Robertson may even be going to finish in third place behind Labour. We understand that's not the case. We understand he's likely to finish second. The Scottish Greens are saying it's not that close. They think there's a significant amount of clear blue water between them and Angus Robertson in that seat. So that will be a big moment here in Edinburgh if they are indeed correct.
And it would be quite a vindication for Lorna Slater, who, along with Patrick Harvey, was unceremoniously shown the door at Bute House by the last SNP leader, Humza Yousaf, when they diverged on two policies, climate and gender. And here would Lorna Slater be turning the tables.
Yeah, that's right. It would be a very sweet moment, a very sweet victory for Lorna Slater for that reason, but also because it would be that breakthrough moment for the Scottish Greens. They also think they're doing very well here in another seat, running a close second behind the SNP's Ben McPherson in the Edinburgh North Eastern and Leith constituency as well, and they reckon they're picking up a lot of votes on the regional list too and could pick up additional seats there. Overall, the party thinks they're doing pretty well across the board, across Scotland in this election, but as you say, it would be quite a moment for Lorna Slater after that breakup with the SNP when the Bute House agreement came to an end, for her to take one of the seats from a big player in the SNP, beating Angus Robertson.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Going straight over now to Caerphilly, to a declaration in Wales.
Yeah. You all right last time? Okay. I, Richard Edmonds, returning officer for the Blaenau Gwent Caerphilly Rumney constituency, declare that the number of votes recorded for each political party and individual candidate is as follows.
Yr wyf fi, Richard Edmonds, swyddog canlyniadau ar gyfer etholaeth Blaenau Gwent Caerphilly Rhymni, yn datgan bod nifer y pleidleisiau a gofnodwyd ar gyfer pob plaid wleidyddol ac ymgeisydd unigol fel y ganlyn.
Welsh Conservatives, 3353.
Ceidwadwyr Cymreig, 3,353.
Green Party, 2447.
Plaid Werdd, 2,447.
Heritage Party, Free Speech and Liberty, 262.
Heritage Party, Free Speech and Liberty, 262.
Open Party, 102.
Plaid Agored, 102.
Plaid Cymru, Party of Wales, 29314.
Plaid Cymru, 29,314.
Reform UK Wales, 23955.
Reform UK Wales, 23,955.
Welsh Labour, 7739.
Llafur Cymru, 7,739.
Welsh Liberal Democrats, 1284.
Democratiaid Rhyddfrydol Cymru, 1,284.
Brace Jordan, 931.
Brace Jordan, 931.
Whatley Mike, 374.
Whatley Mike, 374.
Wright Steve, 71.
Wright Steve, 71.
And the total number of valid votes cast across Blaenau Gwent, Caerphilly, Rhymney was 69832.
Cyfanswm nifer y pleidleisiau a fwriwyd ar draws Blaenau Gwent, Caerphilly,
So,
Rhymney.
Plaid Cymru coming out on top in that vote. Blaenau Gwent, Caerphilly. Of course, it includes Caerphilly, where Plaid won that by-election back in October last year, way ahead there of Labour. 29,314. Reform coming in second, 23,955. Labour not making five figures, 7,739. And the Conservatives coming in there again. Let's just see the shift in the share there. Plaid Cymru up 42%. Labour on 11%. And Reform there, 34%. The story of this election, really, for Labour, squeezed by Reform and Plaid Cymru from the left and to the right. Plaid Cymru there up 19%, Reform up a whopping 33%, and Labour down a corresponding 33%. Remember, this was a seat where we had a recount, and that potentially was for one of those last of the 6 seats, and it was Labour that called for the recount. So that showed how much trouble they were in. It was a difference of about 111 votes, apparently. Labour called the recount, but Plaid Cymru are the ones that have come out on top. I think we can now go to Dan Thomas, leader of Reform in Wales. Danny there, hello to you.
Hello, yes, hello there.
You a happy man?
Yes, of course. I've just been elected in Newport-on-Island, so I'm very happy. But we're still waiting to hear all the results across Wales.
I mean, you are one of the first few Reform candidates to become a member of the Senedd here, elected. You have had defections, but that must be incredibly satisfying, given that you were a Tory councillor for Barnet for 20-odd years.
Well, that's in my past, and I've just led the Reform Wales campaign in Wales, and it's a huge privilege to be elected here. And yeah, I think we were the first constituency to declare. So yes, I was the first Senedd member for Reform to be declared. It's a huge honour, and there'll be many more other Reform Senedd members being declared for the rest of the afternoon. I think now the results are coming through pretty thick and fast, but it's still a little bit too early to determine exactly where we are with the state of play across the parties.
But, you know, it's looking fairly good. I mean, Gawain Towler, who we've been speaking to a little bit earlier, senior figure in the party that obviously you know well, he suggested that if Reform did manage to become the majority party but didn't get an overall majority, that you wouldn't push to run a minority administration. Is that your thinking? Would that be your belief?
Well, we'd have to look at the numbers and the support that we get. You know, a lot of the other parties have said that they wouldn't work with us. I don't think that's a mature way to do business in this kind of situation. But look, we'll do our best to form a government. But ultimately, we need the numbers, and that's what we're getting over the course of this afternoon. We'll see where the numbers land and whether we can govern on our own, or indeed we have to look for support elsewhere.
But the Conservatives have said that they would work with you if they did manage to get enough seats that would help you. Would that be the way forward?
Yep, they're one option. Obviously, they are an option, but there are other parties there. They have ruled us out. They might change their minds. Look, I think the left is pretty fragmented. I think they'll quickly descend into arguing personally, but we'll see how they get on. But we've got days and potentially weeks to sort this out.
What was the message you think that you carried forward in this campaign that seemed to resonate with voters out there?
I think it was the common sense policies and putting the people of Wales first. I think people out there feel that the government, particularly the Labour Welsh government, has been working against them and going after issues that don't really matter. You know, forcing health chiefs to decarbonise their estates and to go after green targets when they're missing their own health targets. So I think we need to have a reset button and make sure the Welsh government is working for the people of Wales, not for ideology.
All right, Dan Thomas, leader of Reform in Wales. Congratulations, and thanks for joining us. We're going to go over to Rita now, who's got some more results from the English elections.
Yes, indeed, Clive. A couple of quick results here. First of all, from Cambridge, as you can see, this is a Labour loss. Labour have come short by 5 seats of retaining control of Cambridge, and they had a majority of 4 before these elections were held. You can see here they're still the largest group on the council with 17 seats. The Greens on 12, Lib Dems on 11, and the Conservatives on 1, and that pale pink is your party, Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana's party, and they have a presence here on Cambridge Council. They have 1 councillor here. The change since last time these seats were fought, it's a straightforward swap. Labour have lost 6 seats to the Greens, and you can see here the vote share. The Greens are in the lead here in Cambridge. It is, of course, a council where there will be a strong student presence. Maybe that's reflected in these results. Labour down 18% in terms of comparison with the last time these seats were fought, and the Greens up by 14%. I want to show you one more council where I think they are still counting. They are indeed. There are 18 of the 21 seats declared, but we do know that this is a Labour hold. Labour's lead is now unassailable, and you can see here they're in the ascendancy by quite some way in terms of the seats. 34 seats for Labour, 11 for Reform, 10 for the Conservatives. But it's always the change that's so interesting, isn't it? And look, Labour have lost 9, Reform have taken 10, and in terms of the vote share, it is Reform that's come out on top. And this is another of those councils where they are only electing a third of all the councillors on the council, and another of these areas where clearly Reform are doing very well, but because of the system, because they're only a third of the seats up, that is potentially holding them back from actually taking control of councils that maybe, we don't know, but maybe they might otherwise be able to take control of. Laura.
Thank you, Rita. And important to note, there are some places where Labour is holding. Clearly for them, the overall picture is very, very difficult. Let's just look at the overall numbers in England for all the parties at the moment. Nigel Farage is about to hit 700 more seats. He's on 694. You can see there that Labour has been falling away along with the Conservatives. And let's go to a particularly politically charged part of the country, if you like, Sunderland, where, of course, nearly 10 years ago, it was the first place to declare that it wanted to leave the European Union, that regional vote, which became very symbolic on that night. Richard Moss is there for us. And, you know, times gone by, that was part of the country, Richard, where Labour would be weighing the votes, or, you know, the old joke, pinning the rosette on the donkey, and it would be elected as long as the rosette was red. But bad for Labour there tonight. What's made the difference?
Well, I mean, this is the very sports centre, actually, where that referendum count was held. And we saw those scenes of Brexit campaigners celebrating. 10 years on, as you say, Labour have been absolutely wiped out here. They're on 3 councils at the moment. Reform UK now control the council. They have 42. They're going to win more. The Liberal Democrats are going to end up as the opposition. But actually, one thing Reform UK and Labour seem to agree on, that it's national factors that have tipped the balance here. The unpopularity of the government, and certainly Reform UK saying the unpopularity of Keir Starmer on the doorstep, has turned this city from, you know, a Labour city for 52 years into one that Reform UK will now dominate. And that means very bad news for the 3 MPs here. And probably, looking at results, almost any Labour MP in the North East at the moment will be thinking, there's no future for me if this continues. Because, you know, these are terrible, terrible results for Labour in a place they used to count for granted. They're clinging to a few crumbs of comfort. They've come second in some of the seats they've lost, and hope they can build back from there. But they are going to be a rump in this council. They're going to have very little influence, and Reform UK are going to be able to do almost what they want.
I mean, that is incredible if you think of the history of that area. If we just look now more widely across the North East, across your patch, Reform putting on 58 councillors in the North East of England so far. The Greens up 14, Labour down 61. Richard, you said that very much the national picture has played into this, people's frustration and disappointment with the Labour government. But when you've been on the trail talking to voters in the last few weeks, is it your sense that this is a temporary 2 fingers up to Labour because of what people perceive as the lack of progress? Or do you feel in your bones that this might be more of a permanent move away?
I think there are short-term factors, like the unpopularity of the government, but there are also long-term ones. Labour, you know, has had this. I mean, the fact the 2024 general election perhaps was a bit of a misleading one in terms of some quite shallow majorities, and there were warning signs then that Reform UK in the North East were coming a strong second in places like Sunderland and other parts of the region. So I think it's been coming for a while, and it's reached a kind of tipping point now. We had Reform UK win as strongly as this in Durham last year, so people have seen a Reform UK council in action in this region. It's become reality, and certainly Reform UK believe that this is the end of 2-party politics in places like this, that you can no longer say that, you know, that the Conservatives are the main opposition here, it's Reform UK, but not only that, they are becoming the party of local government.
Nothing is forever. Richard, thank you very much indeed for joining us. In another part of the North East, Labour's held on in North Tyneside. But let's talk about a different party. You can see the snappers there lining up to take a picture of none other than Sir Ed Davey, grinning away. He loves nothing more than a stunt. And today, Vicky Young, still with me in the studio here, he's got a decent reason to be grinning. the Lib Dems have still got some target seats that haven't yet come in. But so far, have they, well, has he got a reason to be looking like a Cheshire cat, or does he just love the attention?
I mean, look, he loves doing all this. And that,
He really does.
Some in his party think it's great. Others are saying that, he needs to do something slightly different, take a different approach. I mean, the Lib Dems have traditionally done well at local elections. It's always been that there's an area, they build up support, they sometimes get the council, they might win the council. Richmond in southwest London being one of them. Today, they've won every single seat on the council. It's
we were joking in the middle of the night. It's like a one-party state.
But, that's the sort of area. And then in the last general election, of course, they won a lot of MPs. They won more seats than they might have expected. So now it's about where do they go from there. So they are still looking to make gains. They will make gains. And I guess it's about how they progress from there. They're looking at places like Surrey, for example, where they are hoping to make gains there.
And there are new councils there, aren't there? So just to understand that.
They still think there is room for them to progress. And I suppose it's about what do they do after that? How do they use their influence? There's been some criticism from some of the party about, we've got more than 70 MPs. Why aren't we making more of a dent, making more of an impression? Now, Ed Davey would say that they had a very critical position on Donald Trump, for example, the US president, and that they made a lot of headlines through that. They would say that they were more critical before Keir Starmer was doing that. So they do think they've still got room. But, it's a crowded field. That's what we've been talking about a lot today, haven't we? About five-party politics in England, and it's harder to get your voice heard, but they certainly look like, they're still holding up in the areas that they've been traditionally strong in.
But one Lib Dem strategist said to me recently, look, you have to understand, we play a different game. We look at things in a very local lens. We're not trying to play things nationally. Are they saying that to try and spin themselves out of the fact they're maybe not making enough progress?
Yeah.
Or is that genuine?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's true, but I think it's slightly gone the other way around, hasn't it? Because they've got this huge number of MPs. They are, they are the third party, aren't they, in Westminster? So, but it's, what do you do with that? And what is their strategy? Now, they will show progress. I think that's what they're talking about, isn't it? The 8th year in a row of making progress and holding the council they've got. So they would also say that, they're not going backwards too much. I think they did lose Hull, I think it was.
They did. They did. But gained Stockport. I mean, just as we were chatting, we can see there's still plenty of action to come there. The live pictures there in Cardiff and Grangemouth in Scotland, where there are counts underway. And of course, we'll zip over to them when there are results. But just to stick on the Lib Dems for a second, I mean, we can show you all the places where they held on: Wokingham, Winchester, St Albans, South Cambridgeshire. I mean, it's sort of a list of nice, leafy, not completely all affluent, but, pretty nice parts of the south of England. And it's possible, is it not, with a fair wind, that they might actually end up being the party with the biggest number of councillors in England, which, in a funny way, given in Westminster, I think it's fair to say they haven't been making as much impact as they like. That's quite topsy-turvy, isn't it?
But I guess it's where, some have said, their opponents would say, well, look, they've been the protest vote. What they would say is actually in areas like all of these councils where they were already running the councils, they will say that this is a positive vote to keep them in place because people like what they're doing in those local areas. So they see that as an endorsement of what they were already doing. But it is the question of where do they go from there? How much more room is there for them to expand that? And they have always, Ed Davey didn't hear the last section, talked about knocking down the blue wall, attracting those disaffected Conservative voters. Now, of course, there are some areas of the country where they are going to reform, but as you said, in these more affluent places, they're not going so much to reform, they are going to the Liberal Democrats. But is there a ceiling on what they can achieve there?
Let's just have another brief word, though, about Labour. And actually, some good news for Labour in Scotland. They've just taken Edinburgh Southern from SNP. Daniel Johnson has been elected there. But overall, we have talked a lot with good reason about how this is a very difficult 24, 48, 72 hours for 10 Downing Street. Interestingly, though, Louise Haigh, a former minister who's seen as quite an influential person on the soft left of the Labour Party, has given quite a clear indication this afternoon that it's not about to be leadership contest a go-go.
Yeah, she's sort of hedging her bets a little bit because she's talking about we mustn't have a messy contest. I mean, the obvious point here, a leadership contest while you're in power. I mean, I know, the Tories did it a lot, but a lot would say, and a lot of Conservatives would say, they were very much punished at the ballots for doing that. So for Labour to do that while they're in power, many will see it as a huge distraction. But Louise does go on to say, but Keir Starmer has to change his ways, and if he doesn't, then he might have to go.
But just to be clear, though, that's the kind of signal from somebody with a big voice in the Labour Party saying, not quite yet. So if we're interpreting this for people who are watching these results and thinking, oh, is Labour about to crash into a leadership contest? We've heard some very stern words from some union leaders and some MPs on the left, but coming from a different part of the party, there's a sort of, yeah, not ready.
Well, they need a candidate. I mean, this is the truth, isn't it? And, you know, I think you spoke to John McDonnell overnight. He's very much on the left of the party. You know, they don't want Wes Streeting. So it's all then becomes about who you don't want. And if your candidate is not ready, Andy Burnham might be a candidate lots of people would want. He has currently got a job as the Mayor of Greater Manchester. He doesn't have a parliamentary seat and was blocked last time, so he would need... There's a few hurdles he needs to get over before he could be a candidate. And then Angela Rayner, there's plenty in the party who don't want her to be the person. So it's much more complicated than just getting rid of Keir Starmer.
Here's an interesting thing, though. People have often talked up Andy Burnham because, in theory, they say he's terribly popular. The northwest of England is somewhere where Labour is still terribly popular. The results today suggest that Labour is not at all popular in the northwest of England. Do you think that harms his chances?
It possibly does, but then, of course, his supporters would say, but the point about Andy Burnham is he can win in places where the rest of Labour can't win. If he was standing in a by-election in Greater Manchester, he would win it. But, you know, I think it's a risk.
Well, I think I'm not sure if after these results there's any safe seat for anyone anywhere in the country. Let's zoom in, though, to a council, Kirklees, where Labour has had a rough ride. A former councillor there, Carol Patterson, who I believe lost her seat. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Why do you think it's been so difficult?
Sorry, could you repeat that? Sorry.
Certainly. Why do you think the results are so difficult for Labour in Kirklees?
Well, we've really been squeezed here in Kirklees, I think, the Labour Party. Between the Greens on the one hand and Reform on the other.
And why do you think that's happened, Carol?
We've been in power in Kirklees for... Sorry.
Yeah, thank you for contending with the line.
For 20
We've got a bit
years.
of a delay.
So, sorry, why do I think it's happened? I've got a very funny echo, yeah.
Well, if we'll try and contend with the line, why do you think things have gone so badly wrong?
I don't think it's anything to do with the campaign that Labour has run here in Kirklees. We've been really squeezed by the Greens and the Reform because of the national campaigns that they've been running. The campaign from Reform to get Starmer out, I mean, that's all that we've heard from Reform locally. They know nothing about Kirklees. The residents of Kirklees have never seen Reform on their streets before. But it's cut through because people are, as we've heard so many times, frustrated with perhaps the pace of change, the visibility of change of the government's policies.
And who do you hold responsible for that, Carol? We've heard several union leaders have already said the answer here is a change of policy, but also possibly a change of leader. There's a sprinkling of MPs on the left of the party who've said that. But what would your solution be to the problems that you've had?
I think we need to reset both locally and nationally. I don't think it's necessarily about changing our policies, either locally or nationally. I'm very happy with the society that I believe the Labour Party nationally is trying to paint these days, but that's not cutting through, unfortunately, to people. So I think we need a reset. I say nationally, it's not about necessarily personalities or one man or even two men for that matter. But the whole party, both locally and nationally, need to reset.
What do you mean by a reset? Do you mean potentially changing the leader? Because you say it's not just about personality, but what do you mean by a reset?
we need to think about how our message is getting over, whether or not we are listening or hearing, I should say, the people, what they're telling us. I think we need to listen more carefully and perhaps reframe the work that we're doing in a message that gets back to people, which unfortunately I think is being lost. Because I do think, as I say, the society that this Labour government is actually trying to bring about is so much better than any society that we've seen in England for many, many years. Through all the years of austerity, we've battled against that for so long. And it's been a bit hard for us, I think, really, actually, over the last 2 years to actually accept that almost we're in a position to make things change. But we do need to tell people exactly what it is that we're trying to do. And I think it's that message that's not got through.
Carol Preston, thank you very much indeed for joining us and also for contending where there was a bit of a delay on the line there. So thank you very much indeed for bearing with us. Lots happening in Edinburgh.
Yeah, and now we're in a situation we can just look and see where we are in terms of seats. They've been piling up. We have the SNP on 36, Labour on 2, Conservative on 2, Liberal Democrat on 2. With me is Brian Taylor, the political commentator. Brian, what does this show? It shows that SNP are in the game, but what it doesn't show is the fact that mostly their vote's declining.
John Swinney is heading back to he's being returned as First Minister. Let us bear in mind how big that is. He's never won an election in his own right. As leader of the party, he was leader of the party shortly after Alex Salmond stood down right at the beginning. Didn't go very well. Stood down as leader after a disappointing result in European elections. But now he is back. He's won in his own right. He's entitled to feel proud. But it seemed to me that when he was talking to you earlier, his pride was very constrained. It was very, very gentle. He wouldn't say an early demand for independence referendum.
And that was interesting because he hasn't
talk about deals.
Because the truth is that has not been a big feature of the campaign.
No, it hasn't really,
and also part of the reason that I think he's come back in his own right and has got a good majority is the fact that he steadied the ship after some very rocky times after Nicola Sturgeon into Humza Yousaf. And then, he was never going to come back and be leader before.
In the early days, the SNP had got a number of constituency seats and they relied upon the list, or as Labour were pleased to call it in those days, getting elected by the back door. You know what? Those same Labour MSPs would rather be delighted to get in by the back door now, and they're going to need it. They're going to need that
They are going to need it.
The SNP are piling up the seats.
By contrast, they will not get a lot on the list.
No, they will not get a large number on the list. And there was talk previously of could there be a series of parties who were pro-union voting together to install Anas Sarwar, even if they weren't the largest party, install Anas Sarwar as First Minister. I always thought that was for the birds. It's now for the eagles. It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. One casualty that we're expecting and waiting for is Angus Robertson, who ran the campaign, perhaps spent far too much time in the campaign and not enough nursing his constituency. And the question is, for Angus Robertson, when we talk to him, is will he return to Westminster or attempt to return to Westminster in one of the two by-elections that are now, because Stephen Gethin and also Stephen Flynn are back. And that means that there's two by-elections coming up.
They are back, and they've both declared that they will stand down from their Westminster seats in good time, as they have to. They will sort out the staff and all that sort of thing, but then they will stand down. There'll be two by-elections. It would be open to members of the party, of course, to come forward and seek the candidacy in these new vacancies. Angus Robertson, should he wish to return to Westminster, he was formerly leader of the parliamentary group and rather successful, if I may say so, leader of the parliamentary group, a good speaker in the House. He may wish to do that. He may feel that the Scunner factor has overwhelmed him entirely. Well, the gossip that I heard a number of weeks ago from his constituency was that he was campaigning, running the convener of the national campaign across Scotland and was engrossed in that, but then started getting hints that the canvass returns in his own patch, his own backyard, weren't that wonderful, and of course had to then divert more effort to it.
It was too late.
Hasn't been enough. And another result coming in Ayr, the SNP have held the constituency. There was talk there of a reform, as you say entirely rightly. There was talk there of reform. Reform have come, I think it's fourth in that constituency. Now, reform, you look at the bar charts, you see the reform number block shooting up. Well, of course it is, because they didn't stand before.
I just go straight over now to the declaration in Edinburgh.
I, Paul Lawrence, returning officer, for the Edinburgh Central constituency declare that the total number of votes given to each candidate was as follows. Bonnie Prince Bob, Independent, 176. Chris Crichton, Independent, 32. James Dalgleish, Scottish Labour Party, 8,098. Charles Dundas, Scottish Liberal Democrats, 2,168. Tam Laird, Scottish Libertarian Party, 56. Joe Mowat, Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, 2,262. Craig Murray, Alliance to Liberate Scotland, 150. Gary Neal, Reform UK, 1,876. Robert Pownall, Independent, 41. Angus Robertson, Scottish National Party, 7,702. Lorna Slater, Scottish Green Party, 12,600. Therefore, I give public notice that Lorna Slater is duly elected as the member of the Scottish Parliament for the Edinburgh Central constituency. The total number of votes cast at the election on the 7th of May was 35,350. The total number of ballot papers rejected was 109.
Well, that was the moment when Lorna Slater became the first constituency elected Green MSP, and Angus Robertson came third.
It is. It's a Portillo moment. It's a Slater moment. It's also a Robertson moment, coming third. That is a dreadful result for Angus Robertson, who is a senior figure, Cabinet Secretary, the director of the campaign in Scotland, former MP, former leader, as I said, in Westminster. Congratulations to Lorna Slater. She's been through it all, being ousted as co-leader or dropped down as co-leader, and now back there.
With
the
a
very
whopping
first
majority.
Parliamentary constituency won by the Scottish Greens, a remarkable result for the Greens in Edinburgh Central. Incredible. A constituency that has a really varied history. I remember it being a Tory stronghold with Alec way back in the days. It's been Labour as well. Now it's Green. It's very definitely Green by a substantial margin.
So that certainly puts the SNP's gas at a peak for a minute, because actually what's going to happen is now we're going to have some more constituencies, but what will happen now is the interest will transfer to the lists, because that's where the Greens will pick up even more support than having a constituency MP, and that then leads to the quality of the deals.
The Greens have only stood in 6 constituencies. Because of that, they didn't necessarily expect to win any, although they had high hopes, and this was one of the ones where they had high hopes. But because they have very, very few constituency seats, the second vote, which in Scotland is a corrective vote, it's designed to correct imbalances from the first vote. That means that they could benefit from that. Reform, no seats gained so far on the constituencies, but that corrective mechanism will kick in again and give them a fair whean of constituencies on the list.
But let's just be quite clear about how the list operates. That's an amalgamation of the votes.
It is. You take the number of votes, number of seats you gained, you take a tally of the number of votes you gained on the list, and you divide it by your constituency seats plus 1. So anybody who's got constituency seats has a higher divisor, if you get me, and therefore fewer list seats once that division is done, therefore fewer opportunities to win list seats. As I say, designed to be corrective. The SNP depended upon it in the very early days of the Parliament here, established in 1999. They don't depend upon it now. They only took 2 seats on the list last time around, and 62 constituencies. They're not going to be as high as that, but they're heading that way again.
But we are actually heading very quickly to the end of the constituencies declared, because we're 49 of 73, and that's where the movement changed the list. And that's when we have to get arithmetic out.
And of those, after all the the fuss and pizzazz and gallimaufry of entertainment, it's still 41 seats for the SNP out of 49. 41 seats out of 49. If this were a first-past-the-post election, they'd be winning out the park. But of course, it is an election that is modified by that second vote, designed indeed to bring a more proportional balance to Scottish politics, designed by the Labour Party in discussion with the Liberal Democrats prior to the creation of this Parliament to prevent any party, and they meant the SNP, from gaining a majority on a minority of the popular vote.
Well, in a moment we're going to get a forecast for Scotland, but let's just be quite clear. There'll be no likelihood of any kind of formal power sharing or anything like that coalition. It will be vote by vote, subject by subject, deal by deal.
And the first vote, the absolute number one vote, is to install the First Minister. I mean, people are casting their ballots for MSPs. It's not a presidential election. So they cast their ballot for 129 MSPs. Those 129 good souls convene in the Parliament behind me there, and they vote one of their number to be the new First Minister. Who's it going to be? It's going to be John Swinney.
It's going to be John Swinney. There'll be absolutely no challenges with an SNP, and also he's proved, as you say, that he has become leader in his own right.
He has indeed, and the idea of a pro-union coalition is I never thought it was particularly serious. It certainly isn't going to happen. But he isn't going to get. It doesn't look like he gets the 65. To have an overall majority, to govern in his own right, to govern without doing pacts with other parties. Very interesting in the interview he did with you. He said he wanted to cooperate with other parties, with one big exception, and that was reform. He wouldn't touch them. Now, let me be clear, that's not in the vote for First Minister. That's in governing. That's in the budget. That's in confidence votes.
Let's look now at the constituency forecast for Scotland. There it is, that constituency forecast that actually the SNP will be lowest on 59 and the highest on 63, which is a good showing. For the Liberal Democrats, that's lowest of 4, uppermost of 6. Labour lowest of 3, uppermost of 4. The Conservative 2 and 3, and Greens sitting there. Not a likelihood that they will get another constituency, and no likelihood at all in that forecast that Lib Dem 4 and 5, sorry, that was a correction there, and also no likelihood on our forecast that Reform will return an MSP from the constituencies.
From the constituency, the key point being, of course, the top-up lists are yet to follow on the link between the two. It's given the range of constituency seats there, given the fact that we don't have the total for the list, people tend to vote in similar ways. They don't necessarily always have to switch. You don't have to switch. You can vote for the same party. You can vote for different parties between vote 1 and vote 2. But the outcome will be, I guess, John Swinney returned without an overall majority, returned needing to do day-to-day deals, especially on budgets, with other parties, and returned with one big challenge, which is the forecast by the Scottish Fiscal Commission that Parliament behind us there is going to have a £5 billion deficit by the end of this Parliament.
The other big issue, which will obviously be very important in terms of the relationship with the Greens, is what happens about energy. Obviously, the Supreme Court has said we're not opening the Jack Duffield for gas, and we're not opening Rosebank for oil. But as long as more and more this conflict in the Straits of Hormuz goes on, then the pressure is on to stop importing oil from Norway and develop some of our own again.
I think SNP supporters, in terms of a buddy, looking for a buddy in Parliament, SNP supporters will be happier with the Greens. Other parties, perhaps, the John Swinney, I think, would be happier with perhaps the Liberal Democrats, because he doesn't like the green economic policy.
Well, let's turn to John Curtis now. John, what do you make of this?
Well, in a sense, what's happened is basically the consensus of what people anticipate, at least so far as seats are concerned. Now, in terms of share of the vote, the SNP, we're reckoning, are going to get 39% of the constituency vote. That's towards the higher end of the range of forecasts that came from final bits of polling. But the idea that the SNP would get around 60, 61, 62 seats certainly was quite common currency from a lot of the projections, and that seems to be where we're going to end up. Basically, once Labour had won Edinburgh Southern, that was on our list of the seats the SNP needed to win. That was really the last chance of the SNP getting to 65, and then the result in Edinburgh Central has just simply confirmed that. There are only now a couple of other seats where actually, as it were, the SNP's chances of winning are less than 50%, but maybe they might make it. But there just aren't enough of these seats left to take the SNP over the line, and that's encompassed within the range we've got.
But let's just reinforce what Brian said there. It is still an incredible achievement after 19 years to be in such a strong position in Scotland and to be consistently the largest party.
It is, but I think the honest truth, the SNP are winning this election, well, A, because they have a legacy of very high support. They got 48% of the constituency vote back in 2021. But frankly, secondly, they've just been very lucky with the fact that all of the opposition parties have performed poorly. I mean, Labour have done not much more than hang on to their share of the vote last time. We expect them to get about 20%. And meanwhile, the Conservative vote's fallen away very heavily. It's down about 10 points or so to just 12%. It is the collapse of Conservative support, the failure of Labour to make any progress at all, essentially because of Reform splitting the Unionist vote. That's what's opened the pathway to the SNP being able to win this election and to end up with not many fewer seats than they got back in 2021. Because basically it meant the SNP had an enormous lead. But yes, it is certainly a very firm indication that, you know, that 30% of people who voted for the SNP back for the Westminster election, that was seemingly the rump. That seems to be the core SNP vote at the moment. The decision of the Greens not to fight most constituencies, I think we're going to discover, has added significantly to the SNP tally. And with a little bit of progress during the election campaign, the SNP can indeed end up with nearly 2/5 of the vote and almost, but not quite, a majority in Holyrood. It's going to be very, very difficult for their opponents to dislodge them at any future Holyrood election for as long as things carry on like this.
But John, just looking down and looking at that result, we said, and we have had in the past, the SNP has done deals with the Greens. There will perhaps be deals over particular issues. Can you see any likelihood of any kind of SNP deal to get something in the Parliament through that the Greens are absolutely opposed to, i.e. energy?
Yes, the Liberal Democrats, so long as Liberal Democrats are willing to be on the same side. I mean, that's... it's always been clear that let's be clear here now. We haven't as yet come up with an estimate. We don't have a very clear idea of what would happen on the list. And frankly, until we've got that sorted out, it's quite difficult to start playing the coalition stroke who might agree to some kind of deal to support a minority government game. But certainly, given what we've seen so far and given what we know about the politics of the other parties, apart from the Greens, the Liberal Democrats are most likely to be the other potential suitors for the SNP on a piece of legislation by piece of legislation basis. The Liberal Democrats have previously demonstrated a quite substantial willingness, for example, to negotiate with the SNP over the budget.
John, I just want to ask you too, because I've just got, I'm hoping this is right, I have just got news about Sarwar's position. And Brian, have you heard anything about this? But I'm hearing that Sarwar himself may be in difficulty, but I'm not sure about that. But that would be a big surprise and a big shock.
In difficulty as leader or in difficulty in his constituency?
I'm not quite sure, but I think that we're awaiting Glasgow results very soon, so we'll know more later. Thank you very much indeed, John.
Okay,
thank you, Brian.
Very much indeed. Well, a fascinating picture developing there in Scotland. So much at stake. We're going to welcome a couple of new guests to the studio. Munira Wilson, Treasury spokesperson for the Lib Dems, and Matt Goodwin, Reform candidate, former candidate, didn't make it in the by-election. We're very happy to have you with us here in the studio this afternoon. Let's start with the Lib Dems then. We spoke to Vicky about the Lib Dem progress in the last half hour, but as the timetable of these elections, you might still have more gains to make. But as Vicky was suggesting, there are people who grumble in your party about you not punching through enough at a moment when other parties are cleaning up at the expense of the Labour and the Tories so clearly.
Well, look, let's put this in context on what we've seen since polls closed last night. Once again, this is 8th year in a row. We'll be making local election gains. We're on track to have more councillors than both Conservatives and Labour, as we historically did last year, and then repeating that again. We've taken the fight to reform in Portsmouth, where we won overall control. We held them off in Stockport, where they were fighting hard, and beat Labour to take overall control in Stockport. We've held them largely at bay in Sutton and wiped out the Conservatives there. And we're in Jeremy Hunt's backyard taking control of West Surrey, the new unitary authority, and making other gains all over the place. So I think we are having a strong night. I think There are two types of change offered at this election. There's the divisive politics that we see on the extremes of the left and the right, offered by Greens and Reform, or there are people looking to the Liberal Democrats where they've got Lib Dem MPs, where they've got Lib Dem councillors, they see us rolling up our sleeves, delivering for them and offering positive change that builds their communities up rather than trying to burn the system down, which is what the populist parties are seeking to do.
Matt, Munira says you're offering divisive politics and that's why Reform is making progress.
Well, the opposite is true, in fact. There's nothing more divisive than treating the British people like second-class citizens in their own country. There's nothing more divisive than what we've got with a policy of open borders, a policy of mass uncontrolled immigration, trying to scrap jury trials, trying to shut down people's free speech. The reason that we at Reform are doing so well today, the reason that we are reshaping the map of British politics is because we've connected with the decent majority of hard-working, tax-paying, law-abiding British people who have had enough of being treated like second-class citizens in their own country. Labour have clearly become disconnected from Britain, Keir Starmer especially. The Conservative Party, the brand is visibly dying. And what's remarkable to me is the reach of Reform. It's not just down the east coast of England, Essex and Kent anymore. It's into the northern Labour heartlands. It's into Wales. It's Angela Rayner watching all of those seats in Tameside go Reform, where, of course, we ran the Gorton and Denton by-election. That's the legacy of that by-election. But also it's Lisa Nandy, who has been very critical of Reform. You know, Lisa Nandy called Reform a fascist party not that long ago. Well, Lisa Nandy just woke up and discovered that we just won every single seat but one in Wigan, one of the strongest Labour heartlands. So this is unprecedented stuff.
Munira?
Undoubtedly, I think Reform are riding a wave of distrust and anger with traditional politics and politicians. I think the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. As Reform start to run more and more councils, let's see whether they are going to actually deliver on the bread and butter issues that actually impact people's lives. As local councillors, you're not going to be able to stop the boats. You're going to have to fix potholes, make sure you collect the bins, and ensure that vulnerable adults and children get social care and their special educational needs are looked after. And the record so far of where Reform gained councils last year is you're putting up council tax, closing down care homes.
First of all, that's not true. But secondly, why is it so problematic to say that we should control our borders? Why is it so problematic to say it's not acceptable that the British people are being forced to spend £15 billion on accommodation for people who are breaking our laws? Can you just explain to me what is divisive about that? Saying that we should put the tax-paying forgotten majority first.
I didn't say that it's unacceptable to talk about immigration. What I said is that local elections, immigration is not an issue that you can influence if you're running a council. In the same way that with the Greens campaigning on Gaza, you know, these councils don't need a foreign policy. People want their potholes fixed. So what I'm saying is you've played to those issues because they are areas where the British people have rightly got concerns.
Well, hang on. We've also said that we'll represent the hard-working majority in this country. Now, you've just said that Reform councils have raised council tax. That's not true. In a lot of the councils that are run by the Reform Party,
well, Matt, they have increased,
council tax increases have been lower than they have been in councils that have been dominated, but less than other political parties have done so. Reform is changing the political consensus in this country, Laura. We can all see it. And the other thing, just lastly, that's really interesting here. Look at the amount of tactical voting on the right of politics that's now taking place. Conservatives going to Reform. Working class Labour voters going to Reform. Reform is the only alternative to the broken consensus in Westminster.
But it's interesting, you've only won 5 councils overall so far. You didn't take the Isle of Wight, which you were hopeful of doing. You're disappointed by that?
I'm absolutely delighted by the results today. I think this is a historic day in British politics.
OK, well, Reform obviously also hoping to make great strides in Wales. Clive, what's happening there now?
Yeah, many more results have come through. The sun is shining, and it's certainly shining here over Cardiff Bay for Plaid. Of the 9 declared constituencies now, Plaid have won 24 seats, Reform have got 19, Labour 6, and the Conservatives 4. The Greens have won their first Senedd seat with Anthony Slaughter winning in Cardiff. He's the leader of the party. And with me is Anna McMorrin, MP for Labour, and also a Wales office minister. It's good to see you. I suspect it's not a good day.
Well, look, there's no getting around this. It's a really hard day. It's been a hard night, and it is a difficult day for us. And firstly, I do want to pay absolute thanks and my gratitude to all of those fantastic candidates and volunteers who have put their lives on hold, who've put everything into campaigning these last weeks, months, and some over the last few years. And it is a very hard day. We're a Labour family. We feel this greatly.
You are Wales Office Minister. The suggestion from some senior figures here in Wales is that you were warned that this was coming, this tsunami of failure, 18 months ago, and you didn't do anything about it. They use the word complacency crept in.
Look, there's no doubt about it. We now need to take a long, hard look, reflect with humility at what we've done over the past almost 2 years, which is deliver what we've delivered and get on with delivering that, but also, though, look ahead and see what we have. Well, look, we've delivered employment rights. We've put workers' rights in from day one, sickness rights. We have raised the minimum wage. We have put 6 interest rate cuts. These are changes. These are not small changes, but I get it. It's not enough.
Exactly. The people of Wales are not looking at what's going on around the rest of the UK. They want to know what's going on here.
Exactly. It's not enough.
Education attainment levels
and look,
down.
Look,
NHS
absolutely
waiting lists
and
down.
We have staved off here. Welsh Labour has had here. We have had a proud record of staving off over the last decade the worst of austerity. The last few years we haven't done that. We haven't been nimble and bold enough to look at what really matters to people. And I think, I've been out right across Wales this campaign, talking to people on the doorsteps with our candidates and looking at and hearing what matters to people. And we need to do more of that. We've already said that, but we need to now take that long, hard look.
Have you taken the electorate here for granted for too long?
Absolutely not.
And not made enough of an effort to, as you say, to deal with those issues that are very real to people.
Look, we quite clearly mistakes have been made.
Like
and
what?
We need to.
What mistakes?
Well, I think we've invested. There's a lot we've done, as I say, protect Welsh people from the worst of austerity by things like free prescription charges, things like free breakfast clubs. We've done that over many years. I think the last few years, perhaps not looked long and hard enough and taken action on those policies that really are impacting people on the cost of living, on access to healthcare. But our manifesto here was bold. Our manifesto set out really clear actions.
Not clear enough, clearly.
Clearly not clear enough. And I think what we have seen is Plaid fighting that 2-horse race battle, which is not what we had here. We didn't have the first past the post here. We had proportional representation, but people didn't understand it. I was out there talking to people. They were wanted to vote.
But Labour supported it.
Absolutely.
And you didn't explain it?
Absolutely. Look, I think we've got lessons to learn. We've absolutely got lessons to learn on that. And it is about looking on all of us to reflect and set out the opportunities, the focus, that where do we want to go now, and be bold about that.
Well, that's a good question. Where do you want to go now? A bold decision might be to turf out Sir Keir Starmer.
Look, the Tories went from Prime Minister to Prime Minister. It didn't solve any of their problems. Keir was elected just under 2 years ago on a very clear mandate. That mandate was for change. He said it himself. We haven't provided and demonstrated that change is being felt by people who really need it. We're facing very difficult circumstances globally. People want security, but they also need to feel secure in their homes and alleviate that cost of living.
and feel like they can live better lives. So we've got the opportunity over the coming days to set that out. Keir has said so himself, what we need to do to set out a bold vision, but also give people hope and opportunity. And that's what we haven't done.
Doesn't sound very bold.
Haven't done
it. Doesn't sound very bold, I have to say.
What doesn't sound bold?
The suggestion, everything that you've just said was told to people on the doorsteps in this election. And at the moment, with 9 constituencies declared, you've got 6 seats.
Yeah, it's a bad day. Look, we're a proud country of Welsh Labour, but I don't think that this is the end of Labour in Wales. I think now we have a duty to examine what happened today, listen to the people, understand what happened, reflect with humility, absolutely with humility, and say this is our bold offer now for a more progressive, strong vision that we can offer people to see that change in their homes, that security, that being better off, and ensuring that people have that hope and have that bold vision for the future.
All right, Anna McMorrin MP, Labour MP for Cardiff North, thanks for joining us. Just to show you some of the details there of the votes that have come in for the Welsh Parliament. Plaid Cymru, 37% share of the vote so far. Reform, 37%, and the Reform are up 29%. That shows what a radical shift this has been so far in this election. Plaid Cymru up 16, Labour down 27. Let's go to Professor Sir John Curtis for a little bit more analysis on this. It's good to see you, John. On the results that we've got so far, 9 declared, 7 constituencies to go. Plaid seem to be ahead. Where does that put the overall picture, do you think, once we get towards the end of the day?
Well, we are now forecasting that Plaid will indeed be the largest party, and we are anticipating that they will get somewhere between 41 and 46 seats, i.e. probably short of the 49 needed for a majority, though we wouldn't absolutely rule it out, but it seems less than likely. Reform coming second with somewhere between 32 and 34 seats, and then notice the very long tail. Labour can't even be sure of coming third. There's a battle between them and the Conservatives, and then the Greens are going to get into the new Senate, but with only 2 seats, and maybe the Democrats will hang on to the 1 seat that they have. Now, one of the things to note here is there's an important quirk of the Welsh proportional system. The fact that we think the Conservatives are running at only about 12%, and even more importantly, the Labour Party perhaps at 10%, the Liberal Democrats at 6%, the Greens at 7%. This means that all these parties are not doing well enough to be likely to pick up a seat in every constituency. And why is Eleanor Morgan at risk of not picking up a seat? Well, because her party's not going to get 12% of the vote in her constituency. The more that the smaller parties fail to win seats, the more seats there are to divide between the 2 big parties. And so although in the end we're expecting that Plaid will get something like 36% of the vote, the fact that they're going to get 45% plus of the seats is to do with, frankly, the way that the smaller parties have all done rather well. And by the way, the smaller parties in Wales now are Labour and the Conservatives together with the Greens and Liberal Democrats. And that is going to mean that Plaid's command over the new Senedd will perhaps be rather stronger than we might otherwise have anticipated.
Fascinating. Is there any sense at this stage, John, as to where Labour have been leeching support? Is it predominantly to Plaid, or is it predominantly to Reform, or just a combination of the two?
Well, I mean, the honest truth is this is very difficult to tell when you've only got 16 constituencies, only half of which are declared. It doesn't give much variance. But what we know from the opinion polls, it's a relatively simple story. Labour have lost ground overwhelmingly to Plaid, and the Conservatives have lost ground overwhelmingly to Reform. And off the back of that, effectively, Reform have displaced the Conservatives and Plaid have displaced Labour. Now, it's a little bit of a simplification, but that is basically the broad headline. And in a sense, therefore, Labour's problem in Wales serious. This is the most serious, the worst result for Labour of all these elections that took place yesterday. But again, the underlying Labour's problem, the Labour's difficulty in Wales is different from its problems in Scotland, which are also different from its problems in England. I mean, in England, it's the Greens who are doing most damage to Labour. In Wales, they're not particularly significant. It is Plaid that have done the damage. So Labour are finding their support not going in different directions, but it's also going in different directions in different parts of the UK.
Yeah, and what about the suggestion, John, that turnout is over 50%, probably for the first time in a Senate election?
Well, I guess many people who value Welsh devolution and perhaps have always been fearful that it perhaps was introduced in rather shallow routes will be pleased to feel that now that there is more people participating. Of course, we did see in the Caerphilly by-election not so long ago, which again ended up being clearly a Plaid versus Reform contest, a remarkably high turnout there. And it may well be that a lot of people turned out because they're enthused by Reform, and they've been matched by another group of people who've turned out because the last thing they wanted was Reform to be running the Welsh government, i.e. the polarisation of Welsh politics that these two parties between them embody has perhaps helped bring more voters to the polls. And we should remember the history of Northern Ireland. When Northern Ireland was at its worst during the Troubles, you used to get very high turnout in Northern Irish elections. And then when things improved, turnout fell a bit. I mean, it's one of the ironies of democracy that sometimes democracy seems to be more healthy in terms of having a high turnout at a time when actually there are other problems going on that gives you question marks about the health of a democracy in a particular country.
Yeah, so interesting. Professor Sir John Curtice, thanks again, John. I think we can go to Rita now, who's got some more results from England.
Clive, thank you. Yes, let me show you what's happened in Sunderland. And we feel that this is worthy of what we call the big shout, because Sunderland has gone Reform. Sunderland, which has been Labour since 1973, since the time when this council had its present shape, if you like. It's a Reform UK gain from Labour. And look, this is how they've done it. They are now by far and away the largest party with 43 seats, Lib Dems on 9 and Labour on 5. And this is the change since last time these seats were fought. Reform coming in on 43 because they weren't a presence on this council before. And that's partly what's so extraordinary about this, that there had been a presence from the Lib Dems, from the Conservatives, and they were certainly sort of jockeying for position against Labour, but it is Reform that's come in and swooped in and taken Sunderland. So they are still counting there, but Reform needed 38 for a majority, and they've got that in spades. So that is a very, very seismic result there in Sunderland for Reform UK. Slightly different picture at the other end of the country. Haven't shown you the map very much. Everyone knows where the Isle of Wight is. There it is. The Isle of Wight is a hung council, short by one, and it is Reform UK who are short by one. So although, again, they are by far the largest party here with 19 seats, the independents are a big presence with 11 and a smattering of seats for the other parties here. So, a strong performance by Reform, but not on the same scale as Sunderland, and the Isle of Wight has no one party in overall control. I want to show you one other result that we've had in, which is Bexley in London, one of the outer London boroughs. You can see here just south of the river on the borders of Kent. Now, this was also a Reform target, but this is a Conservative hold. And as you can see, Conservatives on 29%. Let's have a look, 29 seats. Let's have a look at the change in the number of seats since last time they were fought. And the Conservatives have lost 4, Labour have lost 3, and Reform gained 7. But that was in no way enough for them to challenge the Conservatives in Bexley. Let's take one look at our scoreboard, where we have just short of 40% of the seats declared. And as you can see there, Reform well in the lead on over 800 seats. Ed Davies, Lib Dems on 523. These two Blues and Reds have had an evening and a day of woe, haven't they? So Kemi Badenoch's Conservatives are losing roughly 45% of all the seats that they hold. Even worse for Labour. Looking at those figures, that is roughly, well, they're losing well over half. Probably that looks to me like about 60% of all the seats that they hold. And the Greens coming up now as we're getting more London results in. Of course, they got the Hackney mayor, their first mayor ever for the Green Party. But, you know, 158 gains for Zach Polanski's Greens. He'll be pretty happy with that. Laura.
Rita, thank you very much indeed. And let's just absorb those numbers for a second. If we can look at them again in the tally, this is looking like a very different picture of local government in England. There it's Nigel Farage smiling away already on more than 800 seats. They'd expected to hit 1,000. And they certainly look like they're having a very good set of results. The Liberal Democrats have gained another 63. They're on 524. And look, Labour falling away by more than 600. The Tories also falling away by 385. And that's before even all the results have yet come in. One extraordinary illustration of some of what has been happening, the churn that we have been witnessing, is that in Kirklees, we were talking to a former Labour Kirklees councillor who lost her seat, Carol Patterson. But in Kirklees, Yorkshire Council, the Labour leader on the council, the Conservative leader on the council, and the Lib Dem leader on the council have all lost their seats. So if you were looking for an illustration of how the more established parties are getting a shoeing at the hands of their newer insurgent rivals, or they like to call themselves insurgent, Vicky Young, that would be it, right?
It is, and there's so many of these results you've seen either five parties, or as you say, it can be Reform taking from the Conservatives or taking from Labour, the Greens taking from them as well. So it's a much more mixed picture than it was before, which, you know, it's unsettling, isn't it, for the parties that are used to having their own way? Well, it's certainly not happening anymore.
There is a danger, though, isn't there, whenever you have an election result where the smaller parties do better. It is not the first time in this country in modern times when people have said, aha, the two-party system is dead and buried, it's over. And then when you get to a general election, miraculously, it sometimes snaps back into shape, you know, thinking of 2019, for example. But at the top levels of the established parties, they are more nervous about that this time round.
Yeah,
aren't they?
They're not fobbing this off as a protest vote. You don't really hear that phrase
not
very
in private
much,
anyway.
do you? No. So I think, and it, you know, even when they're sitting here, they're sort of having to say, aren't they, that this is more than that. You know, Reform would say they did well last year as well. You know, they've been ahead in the opinion polls. That's the other thing. You know, for a long time. So you know, I don't think they're dismissing it. They do know that things are potentially changing. And as you say, it depends how long that goes on for. Now, if you're the Conservatives, their fear is that as the right of centre party and the party of the right, are they being replaced by Nigel Farage? That's what Reform hopes is happening, that actually they will take, you know, voters that way. Not everywhere, but in lots of places. And then you look at Labour, their MPs are worried because they think, well, we're losing some to Reform and then we're losing loads to the Greens. And so it's how do you deal with that, isn't it? How do you deal with that in terms of policies, in terms of personnel?
And Reform is already claiming, and I think we'll hear it very loudly from them in the coming days, they are now claiming they are the only party who are actually able to win everywhere nationally. They may be styling themselves as Heineken, perhaps. We know that Nigel Farage likes to be pictured with a pint, although probably an English warm ale, I think, rather than a pint of Heineken. But is it fair when you hear them make that claim? Is that justified from what we've seen so far?
Well, it is in the sense if you look at the areas as a whole. So if you look at Scotland, they have made massive gains there, you know, in terms of the vote share. If you look at Wales, they are potentially going to be the second biggest party there. They are, you know, getting representation. They are coming from nowhere and across different parts of England, whether you're up in the northeast and you're in Sunderland, or you're down in Plymouth, you know, all sorts of areas, and even around the edges of London, they are making gains. Now, John Curtis, Professor, has talked about this, hasn't he? It is still slightly aligned with a Brexity vote. So it's maybe the long tail of the Brexit vote still happening. But that doesn't matter, does it? In terms, there are plenty of those places for them to reap those rewards and make progress, and they hope lead to that next moment. And they're in second place in parliamentary seats, aren't they? In almost 100 places.
Well, that's right. Even in the general election, I think Reform are behind Labour in 89 seats in second place. And just lastly, we're going to go back to Wales in a second. That bubbling discontent in Labour, these things can change incredibly quickly. Another couple of MPs putting their head over the parapet. Clive Lewis is a Norfolk MP, has called on Keir Starmer to go. That's not that surprising.
No, when I interviewed him on my programme, he talked about how he was going to give up his seat for Andy Burnham. I mean, he then sort of slightly rode back on that, but, you know, we shall see. I've been looking at some of the quotes from some of the MPs. You know, there's a few phrases knocking around. You can tell that they're saying similar things. So we need our best players on the pitch. Brackets code, Andy Burnham needs to come back in some form, and sort of saying to Keir Starmer, don't block him again if there is a by-election and he were to stand. Others saying Keir Starmer needs to set out a timetable for his departure. No signs. He certainly has said publicly that he's...
And absolutely, if you talk to Keir Starmer's allies, they say, you know, no deals, no pacts, no timetables.
Yeah.
If this bubbles into something dramatic, he's going to fight it tooth and claw.
That is absolutely what it sounds like. And, you know, setting out a timetable, we know, you know, Tony Blair did that, didn't he? And once you've done that, I mean, that is the end. It's hard to govern once you've done that. And then another one, as you said, Louise Haigh saying, change your ways or you can't lead us to another election. So clearly saying they're not now, but it's almost like they're saying you have one more chance, or there may be a move against you. But who knows who that will be.
Or one more reset.
Yeah.
Been a few of them already. One more reset. We've heard from councillors around the country that they are looking for Keir Starmer and the national government to have a reset. What may that look like? Big King's speech planned for next week with new laws, new draft laws promised for Keir Starmer to try and take back the initiative. But huge pressure on him to show that he can do things more effectively, communicate more effectively, and actually persuade people that the government is doing the right things. But in Cardiff, Wales is one of the places where it's really been a shocker for Labour so far, Clive.
It really has. I mean, far worse than a lot of people predicted. Just to keep you up to date, Professor Sir John Curtis is suggesting that with 9 constituencies, as I speak, still to declare, Plaid are looking like they will be out on top. Probably not with an overall majority, however, but they've already made it clear that they are willing to govern as a minority administration here in the Senate behind me. Their leader, Rhun ap Iorwerth, he has been speaking in the last few minutes.
I was first elected to serve Ynys Môn nearly 13 years ago, and it's been a privilege to serve the community in which I was brought up and in which Llynos and I brought up our own family, and to now be elected to represent this wider constituency that has also been a big part of my life. All of my life will be an equal privilege, and I promise that as part of a great team of Plaid Cymru Senedd members, we will work every day to the best of our abilities to represent the people of Bangor, Conwy, Môn. Now, today is about the future of our communities here and our nation as a whole. We have offered leadership locally as we offer leadership to all of Wales. As the story of this election has emerged today, it has become clear that Wales demanded that change of leadership, and I look forward to saying more about this later as the full picture becomes complete. My sense of service to my community and my belief in our nation drives me every single day, and Plaid Cymru is ready to serve, not just those who entrusted their vote to us here, but all of the citizens of Wales that have a stake in our nation's future.
Rhun ap Iorwerth, leader of Plaid Cymru, a very happy man, speaking from his count in Llandudno in North Wales, and quite possibly by the end of today he could well be First Minister, but one suspects that that is a debate that's going to go on for a wee while, even if Plaid do end up becoming the dominant party, because it's unlikely that they will get an overall majority. We do have a different voting system here in Wales now as opposed to back in 2021. It's no longer first past the post. It's a proportional system. Let's just bring you up to date with the full state of play now. Daniel Davis has more.
Yes, we've got more than half of the constituencies declared, so we're beyond the halfway point. We can start filling in this virtual Senedd to see how things are shaping up. This is the scoreboard in front of me here. Plaid Cymru in the lead at the moment with 24 seats. If we move over to the left of the chamber, you can see that they are way ahead of Labour. At any point in devolution's history up to this point, you would have seen a lot more red for the Labour Party, but it's been replaced in this election by Plaid Cymru. There's a splash of green of a different shade in the background because the Greens have won their first seat in the Senedd. And over on the other side of the chamber, it's a similar story, where we once had the dark blue of the Conservatives. It's the light blue of Reform. If we look down from above, you can see how Reform UK really has cannibalised the Conservative vote in Wales and started eating into them and winning those seats. Something similar is happening in this election on the other side between Plaid Cymru and Labour. So there we have it. At the moment, Plaid ahead of Reform. The polls have said it would be a race between those two parties. The prediction is now that Plaid Cymru will emerge as the biggest party with the most number of seats, and you can start to see that happening here in the Senedd.
All right, Daniel, thank you for that. Daniel Davies there. As I say, it's now 10 constituencies that have declared, so we've got 6 still to go. Dr. Anwen Elias is here. Independents. Plaid Cymru, they're going to become the biggest party. That's our projection. But independence is in their DNA, but it wasn't really on the ballot box, was it?
No, it wasn't, and they were very careful about not wanting to talk about independence and framing this election as you know, the party of government, and our priority will be to run Wales and make life better for the people of Wales. We cannot expect Plaid Cymru to prioritise independence in this Parliament if they are indeed the party leading the next Welsh Government.
But they are going to have to broach it at some point, aren't they?
Well, the dilemma for Plaid Cymru is that in order to get the support that it needed in this election, it had to appeal to people who don't vote for independence, who don't support independence. Support for independence in Wales is low, and so there's a dilemma there for it, ideologically committed in the longer term to independence, but needing to bring along with it voters for whom that is not important. Now, you can see how there might be a tension there between its core support base, who actually would surely want to see some action in that direction, and yet the party will be very aware that it needs to appeal to that broader support base that it is now drawing on.
As things stand, they would probably need the Labour and possibly the one Green MS as well in order to get the majority. That's as things stand. Do you see them willing to do that with Labour? And do you see Labour willing to want to get involved with them?
That's a good question. I think it will come down to the eventual numbers and whether they will actually have to look to other parties. How far away will they be from the 49 seat of a majority? Will they think they're close enough to run a minority government? But even with a minority government, they were going to need support from somewhere to pass things like the budget, key pieces of legislation. At the moment, with Labour numbers looking so low, one Green seat, nothing so far for the Liberal Democrats, it could be tricky for Plaid Cymru if it is far enough away from that 49-seat majority.
We're just getting word that Ellen Ed Morgan's seat, the First Minister at the moment, they will be declaring quite soon. The indication was that she actually didn't manage to win one of the 6 seats there. I mean, that caps really the state of play for Labour, that their number one on the ticket hasn't made it.
That's it. It really shows how disastrous a result this is for Welsh Labour. If you can't elect your leader, then you clearly are in serious trouble.
You're finished. All right. Thank you for that. Back to you, Laura.
Thank you very much indeed, Clive. Well, another painful moment for Labour, but let's look in the east of England, southeast of England, Thurrock. Now, Labour gained that council in 2024, but it's gone to Reform, and it's gone to Reform very, very plainly. Look at the seat numbers there. 45 for Reform, 2 for Labour. Now, Labour's majority was not big, but let's look at how the seats that changed hands. And you can see there, Reform getting 45 seats, Labour losing 23. The Tories have also gone backwards in the last 24 hours. They've also lost 13. And this adds to our longer and longer list of Reform gains. Just look at this. Thurrock, Sunderland, Suffolk, Essex, Havering, Newcastle-under-Lyme, taking from Labour, taking from the Tories and building on their dominance, their new dominance in local councils in England. And Vicky, these results still coming in are really making it clear to Labour how difficult the situation has become.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I don't know quite what's happened in the last half an hour, but we have a number of Labour MPs, some of them the sort of people you would have expected to say that they want to see change. But it's the formulation of the words that it suggests that they are, of course, speaking to each other about what they do. And it seems to be the idea is, right, we can give Keir Starmer another chance if he changes his ways. What they mean by that, it's hard to know at this point. But phrases like, we need our best players on the pitch. You have to set out a timetable if things don't change. And also basically saying we need Andy Burnham back in Parliament, maybe before Keir Starmer goes anywhere.
Well, let's have a listen to how one of those MPs, Louise Haigh, who's a former minister in government, but who lost her job over allegations about things that she'd done in the past and not been completely clear about. This is how she expressed her concern earlier and her warning to Keir Starmer.
Well, these are absolutely devastating results. They're a hammer blow here in Sheffield, in our heartlands, across the country, and we've lost brilliant, dedicated councillors who get up every day and put their community first. I would say, having spoken to thousands of people during this election period, the cost of living crisis was front and foremost in people's minds. But we've got to be honest, the Prime Minister and national issues came up on nearly every doorstep as well.
There's been I suppose it's a message to the Prime Minister here, but what's your message to the Prime Minister?
Well, look, we're in the middle of a war and serious global instability, and the Prime Minister is doing an absolutely exceptional job on the international stage, and it's incredibly important that he's successful in that role because our constituents' livelihoods depend upon it. But the message has been clear from the public that unless the government delivers significant and urgent change, it's clear that the Prime Minister cannot lead us into another election.
Is that how you feel now? Do you think he should stay or should he leave now?
No, absolutely. We cannot descend into an irresponsible, messy internal contest. The Prime Minister is doing an exceptional job on the international stage, and it's imperative that he's successful. But the government needs to listen and respond to how the public have voted today. And unless they deliver that urgent and significant change, it's clear the Prime Minister cannot lead us into another election.
Well, crystal clear that some members of the soft left faction in Labour are putting the Prime Minister on notice. There is someone else who might believe she had reason to do so, Eluned Morgan, who has been the First Minister for Labour in Wales in the last couple of years. She has lost her seat. There she is on stage in Ceredigion. Quite a moment, a real humiliation for the Labour Party in Wales, Clive.
It is, and it caps a dreadful night. It really does. And dreadful morning and afternoon, and quite possibly a lot of soul-searching as well, as to where Labour goes from here. We've already had indications from some of the senior figures here in Wales that they warned the hierarchy back in London and at Westminster that this catastrophe was coming. But apparently it was ignored, and a sense of complacency is the suggestion that was being given to us as regards Labour's fortunes in these elections. So, yeah, the First Minister losing the seat that she's had. She's only been First Minister since 2024, but now she's out. Kirsty.
Right, well, now it's 61 of 73 constituencies announced in Scotland. John Swinney wins. He's back as First Minister in his own right. The Greens have 2 seats. the first ever first past the post Green MSP in Lorna Slater, and in Nicola Sturgeon's old constituency, Holly Bruce has won. But despite their best endeavours, particularly in the northeast of Scotland, Reform has not won a single MSP so far. It now is all down to the lists. Laura.
Kirsty, thank you very much indeed. And as we wend our way to the end of this particular bit of the coverage, I want to show you the tally of English Council results. Let's have a look at our big tower, if we can do that for you. And it is Nigel Farage about to hit 900 seats, smiling away there on 892. Labour on 510 seats, really having a bad time. The Conservatives also falling away, only with 488 seats at the moment. And the Liberal Democrats putting on seats, as indeed are the Greens. A huge thank you to my colleague Rita Chakrabarti, who's been keeping us right on the numbers and looking under the bonnet at all the interesting races that have been going on around the country. Thank you to all of our guests. Thank you to my colleague Vicky Young, who's done stalwart work here, keeping me company this afternoon while we've been picking over an extraordinary set of results. That is, though, just about it from us at Election 2026 for now. In a moment, you'll be joined by our colleague, Christian Fraser, as the final results grind towards their conclusion. But the big headlines from a dizzying array of contests are clearly emerging. In England, both of the traditional parties have been given a kicking from voters. The Conservatives have fallen back, but Labour has been tanking. And it is unclear right now what the consequences for Keir Starmer will be. He's made it clear he would stay and fight, but the outcomes in the next couple of hours could be grave for him. It's for his colleagues now to consider whether they take drastic action to try and unseat him, or, as he will hope, pull together and battle on. We will see. Sophie, Rayworth, Clive, Kirsty and I will be back together on BBC One again at 7 o'clock. We'll bring you the very latest as the final results continue to come in, and we'll look ahead to whatever will happen next. Our colleagues across the BBC will be here as ever to bring you every twist and turn. Thank you to all of our guests. Most of all, thank you to you for watching at home. Goodbye for now.
Laura, thank you very much. Welcome. If you are just joining us, we've got a lot still to come tonight. Important declarations these next few hours across London, in the 32 boroughs here in the capital. The picture still forming, of course, in Wales and in Scotland, and we will take you live to all those counts as they come in. Vicky Young, our deputy political editor, will be joining me shortly. We'll get reaction from the BBC's lead election analyst, Sir John Curtis, who's still going, and from all the parties to these results that we are seeing. If you are just joining us, let me give you some of the main headlines so far. It has been disastrous for Labour right across England. This is the current scoreboard. You will see that Reform are on 894 seats, with around 40% of the seats declared. Among the losses for Labour, Preston, Blackburn and Darwen, Exeter, Hartlepool, Tamworth, Tameside, Southampton. The party seeing its worst results in Manchester for 60 years. Birmingham, England's largest council, is now no overall control, with Labour losing seats everywhere, to Reform, to Greens, to the Lib Dems, the Tories and Independents. What a story in Wales. Once the heart and soul of the party. Think Bevan, Griffiths, Kinnock. These were the leading lights of the Labour movement, and yet tonight the BBC projections suggest the party that has ruled since devolution will be reduced to just 10 of the 96 seats in the Senedd, behind Plaid Cymru, the biggest party, and Reform. And in just the past few minutes, we've heard that First Minister Eleanor Morgan has failed to get elected to the Senedd. She makes history, becoming the first leader of a government in the UK to lose a seat while in office. That is Welsh Labour's Portillo moment. It's only marginally better for the Conservatives. They were decimated in Essex, where the party leader Kemi Badenoch has her Westminster seat. They lost control there to Reform, who gained 52 seats. The Tories lost 41. Same story in Suffolk, where Reform picked up 41. 40 of them a straight pickup from the Conservatives. We'll pause there for a second and we will go to Cardigan Penrhos, where you can see Eluned Morgan, the outgoing First Minister, is speaking. Let's listen in.
Who've worked extremely hard. I'm very proud of what Welsh Labour has achieved over all the years we have led in the Senedd. But today, the pressures on public services are enormous. That change is clearly not coming fast enough. We're living in turbulent times. There are challenges in all directions. Many expect simple answers to very complex questions. But there are no simple answers, and the budgets are limited. The age of two-party dominance is dead. We need to recognise that multiple parties are now in contention across Wales. Social media has changed the way we do our politics. It sets the political narrative away from cameras and directly into people's homes and living rooms. The electoral system clearly caused some confusion, but many people heeded and heard that message: if you want to stop reform, then vote Plaid. The people of Wales rejected Welsh Labour. I would like to congratulate Plaid Cymru on their momentous success. And if they form the new government of Wales, I know that we will all want to see very stable, clear leadership that is serious and stable. We all want Wales to succeed. Reform has made substantial gains in Wales. We all understand the anger, but Wales is stronger when we stand together. We need to heed the anger, not feed the anger. Being First Minister of Wales has been the privilege of my life, and particularly so as the first woman to lead this nation. I've been proud under my term of office to see waiting lists come down for 9 months in succession, rail services improve, record inward investment, women's health hubs. But today politics is faster and harder. It rewards noise over truth. And we need to understand that world, but we need to hold on to our values. Our values in the Labour Party are those of fairness, solidarity, and community. It is clear that results across the whole of the United Kingdom have demonstrated deep frustration with the Labour Party. We need to go back to being the party of the working class. We need the Labour government nationally to change course. We need the wealth of this nation to be more equally distributed away from the southeast. But I was always clear that this election was about Wales, and Keir Starmer was not on the ballot. I am taking responsibility and I am resigning. Finally, here in West Wales, we live in a place where you learn to ride out the storms. The wind in Wales has shifted from a breeze to a gale. The old certainties have been swept aside and our defences were shattered. We know in the Labour Party we have tough days ahead, but we are confident that the sun will shine again. I wish the very best to the people who will lead this incredible nation. Mae Plaid Lafur Cymru wedi gweld canlyniadau trychinebus. Mi fyddai'n sefyll lawr fel arweinydd y Blaid Lafur. Hoffwn ni long gyfarch.
Eluned Morgan there, the outgoing First Minister for Labour. She is, we understand, resigning as the leader of the party in Wales. A rather sombre concession speech for her. She was always in trouble in Ceredigion Pendraw. But let me show you the nature of the vote in Ceredigion, and you'll sort of understand where it's gone wrong for Labour. So Plaid Cymru taking 31,943 votes. Reform came as the second biggest party with 23,000 votes. Labour only getting 6,495. Now, they needed 12% of the vote to pick up a seat under the new proportional representation system. But there you see Labour only getting 7%. Massive vote for Plaid Cymru and Reform. So Labour getting squeezed from both sides. And there you see it in the vote share. And that really is the picture across Wales and indeed across England. Labour being squeezed by both Reform and from the left of the party, which in Wales, of course, is Plaid Cymru. So Eluned Morgan standing down as the leader of Labour, of Welsh Labour, and of course being replaced as First Minister in the News Senedd. I was telling you earlier that maybe they would get only between 8 and 10 seats. Let's bring in Sarah Evans, Plaid Cymru councillor in Neath. Welcome to you. Congratulations on what looks like a very impressive performance across the country.
Thank you very much.
You're not going to be returned with a majority in the Senedd, and I think what a lot of people will be questioning, if indeed Rhena Prydworth is the new First Minister in Cardiff Bay, is who you're going to go into coalition with.
Well, let's just wait for all the results to come in first, and those discussions now need to take place over the weekend. But what is clear is that people of Wales have spoken, and they want a positive vision for Wales. They want new leadership for Wales, and they've very much seen that in Plaid Cymru.
Do you imagine that you might go into coalition with Labour as the junior partner?
That's not for me to say here and now. As I said, we've still got votes being counted, and there will be discussions taking place over the weekend. But as I said, we are really looking forward to delivering that vision for the people of Wales.
You will have heard Eluned Morgan there in a concession speech saying there are no simple answers. When we look at your manifesto, there's a lot of social spending in that manifesto. How are you going to pay for it?
Our manifesto is costed. We've been really clear on that throughout the campaign. So it's about understanding where that money has been spent and then spending it differently. We know that we need to be measuring impact of spending as well, which is something that Labour hasn't done well. It spends lots of money, but hasn't really measured the impact or had a positive impact in spending that money. And that's something that Plaid Cymru will be focused on.
But you must be aware that on your right is Reform, who've taken a lot of votes from the Conservatives, but also some from Labour, who are saying quite clearly to the Welsh public that we need to do things differently in terms of spending.
Well, Plaid Cymru will be doing things differently as well. We are offering a new leadership for Wales, that positive vision for Wales. People have really grasped at that positive vision that Rhena Prydworth, our leader, has presented, and we will be taking Wales forward now with that new leadership and that positive, hopeful, ambitious Wales.
Sarah Evans in Neath, thank you very much indeed. Vicky Young, presenter of Politics Live, is with me in the studio. That's quite the earthquake in Welsh Labour.
Yeah, and I think, sometimes there are moments on there which sum up a party's situation, and I think this is it, isn't it? Eluned Morgan there losing her seat, the former leader, and she has to stand there, and she's been booted out by the voters. And the situation in Wales, I mean, it's not just a defeat, it is dire for Labour in Wales. And I think, we are seeing that reflected in other parts of the country, in England, where Labour have been strong, in their strongholds for years, that they're being kicked out. Yeah. And I suppose, as she said, what's the problem? They have to look at what the problem is before they can think about what the solution is. But, for the next few years, Labour are not going to be part of the way that, it is governed in Wales, probably. So, big changes there for them. And I think this when people talk about soul searching, I think it's places like that where they've been in charge for so very long and suddenly they're not anymore. And that's where it really happens.
Shall we bring in Thomas Morgan, who's in Cardiff for us, watching these results come in. Hello to you, Thomas. There's been a lot of Labour infighting in Cardiff Bay. 3 leaders in the last term. The polarising effect of getting rid of Vaughan Gething. Maybe Labour have paid the price today.
Yeah, I think they have. I think, you know, there has been some blame overnight and this morning towards London and Westminster. I think that certainly hasn't helped. A number of former ministers and members in Wales were saying, you know, on the doorstep they were hearing far more about Westminster and immigration than they were about Wales as well. But the reality is, if the results turn out, well, Eluned Morgan's lost her seat now, hasn't she? I mean, and they're on course to win possibly just 10 seats. There will have to be self-reflection within Welsh Labour in Wales as well, because for 27 years, they've been the biggest party, they've been the largest party, they've been in government, they've had a First Minister, and the NHS record is dire. It's gone down. The education sector is also not faring very well when it compares to the rest of the UK. So many people in Wales will also have that in the back of their mind. So they've been pushed from both sides, both from Westminster and from their record here in Wales, really. And it's shown really by the fact that people have gone towards Plaid Cymru and Reform. It'll be really interesting to see what happens now with Plaid Cymru. Rhys Iorwerth has always said throughout this campaign that his preference would be to rule as a minority party if he were to get enough seats or to rule on himself. And I think if the predictions are turning out to be correct in that he'd have about 41, 42, possibly 43 seats, short of the magic number of 49, that may be enough really for him to think, do you know what, I've got enough to try and go on my own as a minority government. And when it comes to the crucial votes, hopefully we can pull Labour on side with us as a left-leaning party themselves, really. I think the polls throughout this campaign had Plaid and Reform neck and neck, but in the end, Plaid Cymru look like they're going to be comfortably on top.
Thomas Morgan in Cardiff for the moment. Thank you very much. When you look at what's happened with Eluned Morgan there, and also, I mean, Anas Sarwar wasn't expected to win his constituency seat in Glasgow. We'll see whether he gets a seat through the party list system. But the 2 Labour leaders in Wales and Scotland who didn't want Sir Keir Starmer on their patch campaigning.
Yeah.
And even though he didn't come, it's been disastrous.
Yeah, and you know, as Thomas said there is often, isn't there, blame, and you know, Westminster can be blamed if you're up in Edinburgh and you're looking and things are going badly. And Anas Sarwar, interestingly, of course, he went further than Eluned Morgan because he said that Keir Starmer should go. As leader of the Labour Party and as Prime Minister. So he went over the top, if you like, but it didn't make any difference. It didn't help him, seemingly. It hasn't helped Labour in Scotland. So, yeah, all around Great Britain, there are leaders, whether they're of Labour councils, whether it is the leaders in Scotland and Wales who are looking and thinking, right, this has gone very, very badly wrong. And some of them are pointing the blame at Keir Starmer.
It's like the perfect storm, really, in Wales, because they switched when they were in coalition with Plaid. They chose this new electoral system. And when you look at the historic Labour vote share in Wales, you see why under this new PR system, they were going to fare so badly in terms of their share of the seats. So there you see, you know, collapsing really from a high watermark of 37% in 2011. Just as late as the Conservatives and the Lib Dems came to power. And then, you know, 31, 36% in the last Senedd elections, now collapsing to 11, 12% in most of these 16 regions, the bar for getting a seat.
Yeah, and I think it is the depth, isn't it, of the drop. I mean, that is what is going to be so shocking, and it's always about.
Conversely, there's the Plaid Cymru share.
Yeah, it's not just about the personnel who have lost their seats, and it's also about the psyche, isn't it, of the party, the Labour Party in Wales. They're going to be looking around them and seeing the decimation, and just that drop to that vote share. I mean, it's just something that they wouldn't have predicted for a long time, although, as we said, there were warnings that this might be coming, that they were taking the electorate for granted. They weren't able to turn it around.
Yeah. I want to talk about the hung councils across England. I've picked out 2 or 3 for you, which we could maybe talk about. Shall we start with Bolton, which is one of the English councils that has now gone from Labour control. They're just short of control by 11 now. And on the face of that, you think Labour have done all right. But then if you look at the change since 2023, they're down 5, Reform up 9. And then if you look at the share, you see the story of the night. Reform up 33%. Let's have a look at Epping Forest. Of course, the Bell Hotel story ran for months. Immigrants, the big issue there, just on the Essex border. Tories were defending 12 of the 18 seats. Looks okay on the picture of that, doesn't it? But there you see the shift from Conservatives almost directly to Reform. And Exeter, which was under Labour control, they had a majority of 5. They were defending 9 seats. Again, the picture on the surface looks good, but then they're short by 2. And there you go. They've been squeezed from both the Greens and also by Reform, which, as I said, was really the story of the night right across England. Just before we move on, Vicky, I mean, a lot of these councils, people want change and they want delivery. And yet in a lot of these councils where they voted, they're not going to get that because they're so split across political lines.
Yeah, and there's going to be a lot of trading, isn't there, on these hung councils about who works with who. You know, that is always, you know, the danger is we lose interest and we move on, but actually seeing what happens at local level, who works with who, is significant. And I think you're right, the headline doesn't always tell us what's going on underneath that. So, you know, Labour might, you know, they've lost control, but beyond that, you're looking at who's up and who's down, and you can see very clearly there that the Greens are taking from Labour in large swathes of the country. In places like Manchester, where Labour were never actually going to lose control of Manchester Council, it was only a third of the seats were up, so they were always going to stay in control. But Labour are really struggling to defend any of their seats. In some wards, they've lost every seat to the Greens. So again, that is what I'm talking about when you talk about the psyche of how it affects the MPs who are in those areas, as well as the wider Labour movement.
Let's bring in former Conservative MP and former party chairman Sir Jake Berry, who is now with Reform. Nice to see you. Thank you for coming on the programme. We just showed the picture in Bolton and in Exeter, 2 opposite sides of England, and the story is much the same. Reform picking up votes, obviously, from the Conservatives, but also from Labour.
Yeah, and what a great night and day is turning out to be for Reform. I'm tracking it here live in the studios. I think there are over 900 seats now Reform has picked up. But particularly if you look in the northwest of England, and I was out campaigning actually lots of places all over the country, an extraordinary night for Reform in Wigan, in places like Bolton, and also in my old constituency, Blackburn with Darwen, where they managed to break Labour's grip on the council by gaining a number of seats.
Put some of these councils up while you're talking. Thurrock, Sunderland, Suffolk, Essex, Havering, Newcastle under Lyme. It's going to be a test in the next few years, is it not? I mean, in the few councils where you've had control, there have been problems. Staffordshire, the leader of the council was accused of racism and quit. His replacement was accused of racism and quit. There were weeks where there were no leaders at all. So you're going to have to perform in these councils.
Absolutely, and that's what people voted for, didn't they? Or haven't they? Yesterday they voted for change. And actually, if you look up and down the country at Reform local authorities, for example, Lancashire County Council, somewhere I was an MP for 14 years, reduced the backlog for SEND parents, special educational needs parents, the backlog in the local authority, which had been, in some cases, many years, and I say this as a parent of a child with additional needs myself, to within 10 weeks they'd got rid of the backlog. If you look at places like Northamptonshire, where tens of millions of pounds are being invested in repairing our roads, that's what people want. That's why they've been voting Reform at this election. There is a record of success.
But Nigel Farage said today, Nigel Farage warned people today not to expect miracles. There already seems to be some expectation management. How much of the change that you've been promising on the doorstep is in fact constrained by the realities of local government finance?
Well, you know, the first thing is this isn't a national election. I wish it was not a national election in England. It is in Wales and Scotland, obviously. I wish it was. I wish we were having a general election. And then, of course, if we had a Reform government, we could do much more. In local authorities, people know that Reform local authorities have increased their council tax less than other parties. They're delivering real change. But, you know, frankly, there is no magic wand to fix decades of underinvestment in things like our roads, our schools, special educational needs, adult social care. But Reform authorities up and down the UK are finding tens of millions, in fact hundreds of millions of pounds of savings to reinvest back in their local community. And that's the real change that a Reform council will deliver for you wherever you are in the United Kingdom.
I mean, I'm just looking at this scoreboard here. 43% of the seats declared. You're up 924 seats. It's possible you might get to 1,500. Do you think, on the basis of this vote share and the seats you've picked up, that Nigel Farage is the favourite to become the next Prime Minister?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I said all along that I thought if Reform got 1,000 seats, which would be an extraordinary achievement, coming from a baseline of, in some measures, just 2 seats. It's an extraordinary thing.
But you didn't,
Look,
you've knocked off 30% of the vote share. Although you've done well in seats, you've knocked off 30%. That would not give you a majority in the House of Commons. So you'd have to think about joining with the Conservatives, wouldn't you?
Let me answer the question. The question you asked me, which I happily answer, is Nigel Farage now the favourite to be our next Prime Minister? I think emphatically the answer to that is yes. But this is just the start. Does Reform need to do better to secure a majority? You've just read the figures. I'm sure they are correct. I'm sure you wouldn't mislead me or any of your viewers. In fact, I know you wouldn't. So we have to do better. But this is just the start. And if you look where Reform is winning, I believe they've just taken control this afternoon of Sunderland Council. They are reaching far further into the red wall, as we used to call it, than Boris Johnson ever did when he won his majority back in 2019. And they're also dismantling what the Conservative Party used to refer to as the blue wall in places like Essex. In fact, Kemi Badenoch's own backyard, her own council has fallen brilliantly to Reform. The steps the Reform Party are taking are huge. It's a seismic day in British politics. And it's just the start. And let's not forget,
but at national level,
if Nigel Farage hadn't campaigned really hard against all these cancelled elections, there's 4 million people in this country who never would have had a chance to vote.
But at national level, you're asking people to put their trust in a party that doesn't have a full structure yet. You don't have a foreign affairs spokesman. You don't have a defence spokesman. I mean, these are the things that national parties build up over years, and you don't have that infrastructure.
Yeah, we've been really clear at Reform. That's a fair thing to say. In fact, we do have a foreign affairs spokesman. It's Alan Mendoza. But, we've been really clear that Reform is a start-up. It's building. It's professionalising very quickly. I think the amazing campaign run by David Bull, our chairman, in this election demonstrates how quickly we have caught up with our opponents. But actually, Reform is different. It's a party that isn't like the two broken parties of Conservative and Labour that is rooted in an ideological mindset that ignores voters. Reform is about solutions, and that's why people are voting for it. They want change in Britain. They want us to fix some of the challenges we have, whether it's our broken borders, challenges we have in the NHS, challenges in the education system. They want a party that pragmatically looks at it and says, how can we bring real solutions that will deliver for the British people? That is what Reform is. Look, it's a new political party. In 2021, Reform only had 1% predicted vote share in Wales. We're now going to be the second largest party in the Senedd. This is an historic day in British politics where Reform has smashed the red wall, demolished the blue wall, and looks set to get real gains in Scotland and Wales.
Lots of people to talk to. Jake Berry, really grateful for your time. Thank you for coming on. Let's go straight to Scotland and speak to our political correspondent, David Wallace-Lockhart, who is in Glasgow looking up the seat projections. What do you see, David?
Well, this is actually where the seats currently stand. The SNP sitting on 54. We're fairly confident they are going to be the biggest party in the Holyrood Chamber, but that they're going to fall slightly short of a majority, which requires 65 seats. So if we cross over here, we can have a look at the constituency map of Scotland. Given those results, you won't be surprised to see there's a lot of yellow on it. We can also switch that to what we call our hex map, which has every seat in Scotland but shows it as the same size. So it sometimes gives us a better idea of the true picture, distorts the country a bit. The outline of a hexagon shows who won a seat in 2021. The inside of it shows who's won it today. Now we're going to look at a couple of seats specifically which perhaps tell us something of the story of this election in Scotland so far. The SNP fallen a bit short in some of the seats they would have had to win for a majority. So let's talk about Edinburgh Central. There's been a Green surge there. This is actually the first ever constituency the Greens have won. They've taken it off the SNP. They did add a second constituency around 20 minutes later in Glasgow, but a big win there for the Green. And what about Scottish Labour? It's been a bad day for them so far. If we're to take a seat like Rutherglen and Cambuslang near Glasgow, this is where Labour would have had to win if they'd wanted to mount any sort of serious comeback. It's a sort of classic central belt of Scotland, SNP Labour tussle, but the SNP have actually increased their majority here. But remember, we've not seen the full story yet in Scotland because we also have regional seats to come. This is the second vote Scottish voters get. A formula is applied to it that reduces the vote share of parties who've done well in the constituency vote we were just speaking about. So when these seats get allocated, 56 of them, we'd expect to see the likes of Labour, the Greens, the Conservatives, the Lib Dems, and of course Reform UK start to pick up the bulk of their representation through these regional, sometimes called list seats. It's hard for the SNP to win here because the SNP are winning so many constituencies, and ultimately that's probably what will deny them any sort of majority.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Let's bring in Lorna Gordon, our Scotland correspondent, who's also in Glasgow. We're watching all the news about Anas Sarwar. We just talked about Eluned Morgan in Wales, who's standing down as the Labour leader, lost her seat. What's the story for the Labour leader in Scotland?
Very flat results for them so far. They talked up their chances of winning during the campaign, but when he walked into the count here in Glasgow earlier on this afternoon, he conceded defeat with only a few constituency results announced. He said his party was hurting, that it was his job to stay on and try and bring them back together. He said he didn't think this campaign was about independence, but that it was more about a sort of more generalised dissatisfaction with politics. I think that's probably also reflected in the fact that turnout looks to be down in many of constituencies as well. As David just said, though, you know, the constituencies, many of whom have now declared, doesn't give the full picture here in Scotland. You will see a big change in the results as those regional list results start coming in through the evening. But nonetheless, what we see in Scotland is really a picture of something staying the same. The SNP staying in power, likely to stay in power for a fifth consecutive term. I mean, to put that into some kind of context, that means that some first-time voters in this election will only have ever known a government in Edinburgh that is SNP, and some things changing. Reform will pick up seats, Labour down, the Conservatives down, and as David also mentioned, the Greens for the first time picking up constituency seats, one across in Edinburgh and one here in Glasgow.
Just one blip for the SNP, quite a sizable one in Edinburgh Central. Angus Robertson losing his seat. What's his future?
Hard to say, really, isn't it? He's had he's been one of their big beasts of politics, a career down at Westminster, then a career up at the Scottish Parliament, roles in government up here. It had always been seen as a very tight contest, Edinburgh Central. Three parties thought they were in with a shout, the SNP, Labour and the Scottish Greens. Ultimately, it wasn't his turn. He'll be licking his wounds, reflecting perhaps whether he now has a future in national politics in Scotland.
Lorna, thank you very much indeed. Let's speak to the Secretary of State for Science, Liz Kendall, Labour Secretary of State, who is with us. Good to have you on the programme on such
pleasure.
a difficult day. Can I read you two comments? One from an MP, one from a union. Here's Dan Carden, the Labour MP for Liverpool Walton, who said the party needs to be honest with what the message is we're being given. This is a rejection, he says, of the lanyard class, the progressive elites, and although he doesn't spell it out, he most likely counts the Prime Minister as one of them. Here's Angela Egan, union leader, Unison leader. Labour faces oblivion. What must change is not just the leader, but the approach. What do you say to them?
I mean, there's no beating around the bush. These have been truly terrible results for Labour, and I think about all of the hundreds of councillors and the Welsh Assembly members and the members of the Scottish Parliament who've lost their seats, people who've worked hard for their constituents and served their communities, and I think it's been a heart-wrenching day. And the voters has given us a clear message that we are not good enough and we need to change and we need to set out a clear vision for the future of the country where we deliver that change
So
for
you
them and
take
their
responsibility,
families.
do you, as a cabinet member, as much as the Prime Minister?
Absolutely. It is the Prime Minister himself and
So
we
what
all
have you done wrong?
Well, I think there's two sets of things here. First, I think that there have been too many unnecessary mistakes that have been made. And
U-turns?
secondly, such as the mistake on winter fuel, I'm glad we've put that right. We've ended up in the right position on that. But also something much more profound, I think, which is that in rightly spelling out the challenges that we face as a country, we have failed to provide enough hope and optimism that the future can be better.
But John,
and that is
John
something
Curtis
I
would tell
think
you.
that if
John
I can
Curtis
just
would tell
finish-
you that people don't understand what the plan is. It's not just about delivery. They don't know what the Labour plan is.
Well,
It's
let
not
me
been
tell
spelled
you-
out to them.
Let me tell you two things that I think we need to focus on. Firstly is a better future for our young people. I have heard time and time again parents and grandparents worried about where their kids will get a job that pays a decent wage, how they'll ever get on the housing ladder. And I want every single young person to be in education, employment or training. Currently 1 million aren't.
All right, well,
we're making...
on housing, you're miles behind on your housing target.
Yeah, and we need to do far more, just as we do on opportunities for young people.
You
And
see,
the
what
second
what I'm
thing...
struggling to understand, you talk about reset, and other
Well, you-
Labour MPs have come on today and talked about the reset, but we don't fully understand what the reset is.
Well, if you would give me a chance to answer the question, I'd be able to explain where I think we need to change and be bolder. And the second thing is the area I lead in, which is shaping this incredibly powerful technology, AI, which is hurtling down the tracks at us and giving young people the skills they need to get those jobs of the future and making sure the benefits of technology are felt in every part of this country, not just for a few at the top. Those are the bold changes that we need to offer people hope and optimism for the future, because there are many great things about this country and we need to provide that clarity of vision. And I think that is what you will hear Keir Starmer talking about in the weeks and months ahead.
Right. Well, the other conversation will be about who might replace him. And of course, attention will again turn to Andy Burnham. What might be particularly hard to take for some Labour figures are the results in places like Tameside in Greater Manchester, the patch of the former Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner, or in Wigan, where Lisa Nandy's from, Manchester, where of course Andy Burnham is the mayor. These are places where you would expect Labour to be doing quite well, where the big Labour beasts are. I mean, notwithstanding the fact that he's got quite a lot of hurdles to get over, Andy Burnham, even to get a seat, would you be confident of winning a by-election anywhere in England right now?
Well, I've known Andy for many, many years. He is absolutely one of our star players. And I think the challenge that he and others face in the Manchester City region is the same challenge that Keir Starmer faces across the country, which is that in some parts of the region, as you said, Tameside and Wigan, we've lost councillors to reform. And in Manchester itself, you've seen a big rise in the Green vote. I think Andy is the best person to lead that fight back and demonstrate the changes that he campaigned on to be elected as mayor.
Or as mayor?
Provide. I think Andy should serve his term, just as he's promised the electorate to do, that he would do, and just as Keir Starmer has said he will do.
So you don't think he should come back to Westminster?
I think he should serve his term, and after he's finished that, then it's up to him what he decides to do. But the challenge he faces in the Manchester City region is the same as Labour faces right across the country. And I think rather than have a discussion about whether we should turn left or right, we need to set out what we believe in and fight for the changes that people deserve. Because I tell you what,
So you don't believe, like Ed Miliband,
have been, these votes are a comment on what's been happening nationally over the last 2 years, but they are also a vote about the last 2 decades or more, when people from the financial crisis onwards have been hit time and time again, ordinary people, and they want leadership that can take them to the future through those challenges
They want
and
leadership.
offer better
And I'm sorry
hope.
to interrupt you, but obviously we're pressed for time. I'm sorry to keep interrupting you. They want leadership.
I'm trying to
And
answer your
I
questions,
know you
though.
are, and you're doing it very well. But Ed
Many
Miliband
thanks.
says that the Prime Minister should set out a timetable. for a transition?
Well, I don't know the details of conversations people have had with Keir. He's not going to go, and he's not going to set a timetable. And what I think is, you know, the calls to set a timetable are just a kind of veneer of process, calling for a leadership challenge, and the yet more internal infighting. And you know what? People want us fighting for their jobs and their future, not our own jobs and our future. And the public will not forgive us if we descend into infighting and constantly seek to try and change the leader just as the Conservatives did. We need to offer hope. Change is on the way, change is coming, and we will deliver a better future for you.
Liz Kendall, I know it's been a difficult day. We're very grateful for your time on the programme.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much. Well, let's bring in the Conservative viewpoint, shall we? We've got Julia Lopez, Conservative MP and Shadow Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology. Your Oppo number there.
Yes, indeed. I thought it was very interesting, if I may say, that Liz didn't talk at all about one of the defining moments of last year in the parliamentary calendar when she presided over Labour's utter failure to be able to cut welfare. And one of the things that was coming up on the doorstep for me was this sense of deep injustice from working people that Labour have jacked up taxes on jobs at the same time as failing to cut the welfare bill. Liz didn't acknowledge that in anything that she said just now. And that was a defining moment of where Labour went wrong.
If you were answering the questions on the doorstep, they don't seem to have liked the answer you've given. Let me put up some of the Conservative losses as we talk. Where's the Badenoch bounce?
Well, we won Westminster back, which was one of our flagship councils that we lost to Labour.
But you lost
very
Exeter.
Pleased to get that back.
You lost Exeter, which is, of course, where the leader is from. Essex, sorry.
Got
not Exeter,
Harlow.
Essex. You lost Suffolk. You lost Hampshire. I mean, these are Tory blue areas.
It was a tough night. Oh, look, I mean, I was in Havering this morning. We didn't lose Havering. It was a residents' association controlled council, and the residents' association lost that.
Reform gain.
Yes, it was a reform gain again, and it was a very difficult night for us. I'm not going to try and dress that up as anything else.
You're an opposition party facing a deeply unpopular Labour Party, and you're going backwards.
I think that what we saw over the course of this day is the continuation of the deep discontent that was shown us in the 2024 election. We're about 18 months on from that, and I did not expect at this point in the cycle that people would have moved on from that, and I think that's become plain. We're doing a lot of the work to rebuild that trust, and we're seeing some of the green shoots of that with Westminster coming back, with the result we saw in Harlow, with Bexley and Wandsworth. But we were never expecting to be able to get some kind of sweep across the country. We know that there's a lot of work to do.
But Julia, you must, I mean, you can't, like Westminster and Wandsworth, these are places that would historically have been conservative. I mean, if you're trying to take some kind of comfort from that, that is a bit clutching at straws. Are you worried that in the meantime, you say you're building back trust with the electorate, but in the meantime, you're being replaced by Reform as the party of the right?
I think they are very good at tapping into the deep discontent when it comes to the economy, when it comes to things like immigration. It's a sort of pub diagnosis of what's gone wrong. There's a lot of diagnosis, but the electorate's going to move on to, OK, what are the solutions for this country? And I think that is where there's going to be now a lot of scrutiny on reform and where we go from here.
They might think you had your chance. That's the problem for you, isn't it? You were in power for a long time. You had your chance to deal with issues like immigration, and they would say you failed and they're willing to give someone else a go.
Well, I don't think that's entirely true. I think we have 3 years until the next general election, in which the electorate is actually open-minded as to who they're going to choose. I think there's a hell of a lot of road left to run on this. I think you're going to see some profound economic challenges going forward, and I think the electorate's going to want solutions by the time of the next general election. And we want to be in the solutions business, not just the diagnosis problem.
Lord Gavin Barwell, the former Chief of Staff, said overnight that there's no point fighting reform on reform territory. If you want reform, you vote for reform. Ruth Davidson, who did pretty well in Scotland bringing the Conservative vote together, she said Kemi's no coherent plan to unite the country. So they see a clear gap in British politics, in the middle of British politics, which you're not filling.
I think there's issues that the voters are telling us that they want any party, whether it's Labour, Conservatives or Reform, to deal with. Primarily immigration, but also the problems with the economy. Those are the areas that we are focusing on, and we think that the economy is going to be one of the most important issues going forward at the next general election. I think we can build a broad coalition on that issue, because it's going to be a very desperate situation in a few years' time.
Can we just have a look at some of these Conservative wards that you've lost? Here we go. So we're looking. Conservative wards that the Conservatives have lost that have gone to Reform, 24% up for reform. So it's almost a straight swat, isn't it? They're taking directly from you in these wards up and down the country.
I can't see the stats you're looking at. It's a very mixed picture across the country, and I think that's what's going to be very interesting going forward electorally, that there are different trends happening in different areas. It makes it a very complex political situation to be able to analyse. So I don't think it's necessarily, that's not what I've seen across in a total sweep. Our vote share nationally, I think, is about 20%. We are the second party behind Reform on vote share. So I think, as I say, I can't see the stats you're looking at. It's been a
But I think
bit
the
of a mixed
difference.
picture.
I think the difference, if you go to my neck of the woods in sort of Lancashire area, in some of these old mill towns, they are reaching towns that you don't get close to. So they are appealing to the working class vote in a way that the Conservative Party in those areas never did.
Well, we saw a big change in the electorate in the 2019 election, where we were able to make gains in seats that we'd never, ever been able to get through before. I think that tells me, I mean, I feel I'm a relative veteran now in being in Parliament for 9 years. We have seen so much political change in the course of those 9 years. I think there's going to be a lot of volatility, a lot of change. I think the message to every party, and I include Reform in this, is that everybody is on watch, and we all have to try and rebuild trust with the electorate and actually start delivering on the messages they are giving us at every one of these elections.
Julia Lopez, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Good to get the Conservative viewpoint. Just give us an upsum before we move on, Vicky, about what you heard from Liz Kendall.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting there is that she's saying very clearly that the Prime Minister, as he said this morning before a lot of these results came out, that he's not going to set out a timetable to leave. So I think the question now in terms of what happens to Keir Starmer, he says he's not going anywhere. These results have come in. They have been, catastrophic for Labour in many places, including places like Wales. But the question is there going to be a move against him? So what we've seen so far is no one from the Cabinet making that move. We have seen some union leaders making that move. And what we've seen in the last hour is quite interesting, and it must be coordinated because they're using the same kind of language. It is several now, Labour MPs saying it's time for an orderly change. So what they don't want is a leadership contest. But what many of them will want...
But how easy is that? Because
it's
you
not
just
easy
heard Liz
because
Kendall saying we need to move with speed. In the Labour way of changing the leader, I mean, that could be weeks,
But this is why they want it to be ordered. They're not saying they want an open contest. They want Keir Starmer to say that he will stand down. They want a timetable. Several of them have used the word timetable. They don't want a messy contest.
So he would stay in power while...
Yeah.
But you know how quickly power leeches away once you declare you're...
But the main thing here is that the person that most of these people who I can see who are saying this would back is Andy Burnham. Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, he doesn't have a seat in Parliament. So the first thing that he needs is a seat. If that were to arise in a by-election, what happened last time? Keir Starmer and the leadership of the party made sure that he wasn't able to stand. He was blocked from doing so. And what these MPs are saying is he can't be blocked anymore. He has to return to Westminster. They want that to happen seemingly before Keir Starmer says, I will now step out of the way. Now, there is no suggestion Keir Starmer is willing to do that. No. But I think it is very significant in the last hour that there have been several MPs, not all of them people you would expect, who are now calling for this to happen.
Can I just add, it's no guarantee that Labour would win a by-election in these circumstances.
Well, it's just the point I made to Liz Kendall, yeah. I mean, obviously that is the question where they parachute him in. Let's bring in Coletta Smith, Your Voice correspondent, who is in Tameside. It's one of those areas, one of those councils that Labour held, which is now under no overall control, I think. Is that right, Coletta?
Yeah, exactly. There were 19 seats up for grabs here, not the whole council, but a third of it. And 18 of those 19 seats flipped from Labour to Reform. It was an overnight count, so people here through the day have spent the day chewing over that thought, working out what the implications are, and indeed reacting to that. This is a constituency that spreads right from East Manchester. It's a sort of long, thin spoke that spreads right out to the Peak District. It covers a lot of constituencies, 3 different parliamentary constituencies, one of which is held by the former deputy leader of the Labour Party, Angela Rayner. So all eyes here on her, but also really this the idea around here is that this is a classic Labour heartland. Within about 300 metres of where I'm standing now, you can see old cotton mills. This is an area that Labour considered their own for many generations, but it really is changed times, as I've been hearing throughout the day.
Very sad. I was hoping for a lot better, to be honest.
Did you vote yesterday? Were you?
Yes,
okay.
voted, yeah.
Can I ask who you voted for?
Labour.
Okay.
Always vote Labour.
And how does it feel this morning? I mean, obviously it's a big shift, isn't it?
It's devastating.
It's Labour. No good. Labour's no good. Don't just say. Very sad again. Labour has lost all seats here. They the only one seat they want here.
Did you vote yesterday?
Yes, I voted yesterday.
And who did you vote for?
I voted for Labour, but this morning I heard it's a disaster.
Getting up and seeing that reform wins everywhere. I said, hey, it's a big change, you know. Yeah.
And how does that make you feel?
I don't know, a bit weird and scary as well. Yeah, let's hope for the best. Let's see what they're gonna do.
We don't like Keir Starmer.
Okay.
So I want him, but also I'm more for the migrants, getting rid of the migrants really, coming over on the boats. So
not legal ones, illegal.
Yeah.
Illegal migrants and stuff.
What we've seen here is that swing happening in real time from Labour to Reform and people reacting to that there. But if Andy Burnham is looking for a safe seat in the North West, then this is a clear signal. Not only a positive vote for Reform from people here that I've been chatting to, but really an anti-Labour vote who they feel have let them down. They're disappointed, they're angry and they're frustrated. So if Andy Burnham's looking for a safe seat in the North West, it's becoming increasingly difficult to do that in this game of musical chairs.
Yeah, that's the interesting point, isn't it? Just when you look at Tameside Council, I mean, Labour have the majority of the seats, Vicky, but they'd have to rule as a minority there. And the point that Coletta makes is, you know, if you're going to drop Andy Burnham into a by-election anywhere in the North West or across the North at the moment, it's difficult.
So the North West, Manchester, Greater Manchester has been really, really difficult, really bad for Labour. Places like Wigan, where they've held on because, again, only a third of the seats are up, but Labour lost every single seat they were trying to defend. That is Lisa Nandy's patch. So you're a cabinet minister who's representing a place like that. You look at Tameside, that is where Angela Rayner has her seat. You're looking at this decimation of a lot of the vote there.
Wigan down 22,
They've lost all of their seats. So, but now, if you're going back to Andy Burnham, his supporters say, but the point about him is that he polls above the party. He is very popular, especially, of course, around Greater Manchester, that they say he could go into a seat and he would bring up that Labour vote. But, you know, I still think it's a risk. And there are other bits where, on Manchester Council, where they are losing loads of seats to the Greens. So it is that pincer
doesn't so much matter if you're more popular than your party. Kemi Badenoch polls in her approval ratings more than the Conservative Party, and look what's happened to them.
Yes, it depends how much it drags them down. That's what they would say. And this has been the argument, hasn't it? There have been people, as we've said, Anna Sarwar, saying that actually what's happening at Westminster and Keir Starmer's leadership itself has dragged down the Labour vote in Scotland. So, you know, he's being blamed for an awful lot there.
Let's go to Wales. It's been a seismic hour in Wales with the announcement from Eluned Morgan that she is standing down as the Labour leader and, of course, will be replaced as First Minister. Daniel Davies is in Cardiff. He's going to show us how the Senedd is shaping up. Daniel.
Yes, there's only one constituency left to declare, so we can take a look at the political makeup of the new Senedd, and it's very different from what we're used to seeing here in Cardiff Bay. Plaid Cymru is the biggest party. They're on 39 seats. If we pan over to the side of the Senedd chamber, you can see how they are racking up the seats here. We are used to seeing a lot of red in this chamber for Labour, but Labour has been dislodged in this election. There they are. And there's some dark green as well, representing the Greens' first seats in the Welsh Parliament. Over on the other side, there's a similar picture happening where Plaid Cymru has swallowed the Labour vote. You can see the light blue of Reform UK have eaten into Conservative support. The Conservatives, the dark blue, have shrunk significantly. So it's Reform UK cannibalising the Conservatives in Wales, but Plaid Cymru pushing Labour aside, becoming the biggest party. Not half the seats. They won't win an outright majority, but we're used to that. There are always hung parliaments here in the Senedd. No party has ever won an outright majority, although it looks at this stage that it will be, well, whatever happens in the final seat, to declare this is an historic election, a real turning point in Welsh political history. I'll take you to the map of constituencies and you can see what's happening out in Wales, where the success is coming from. We'll light up these 16 constituencies according to the party that has topped the poll. Remember, there are 6 members elected under a proportional system from every constituency. The green seats are where Plaid Cymru has come first. The blue seats here in the east, by and large, are where Reform have topped the poll. If we flip it to see who's come second, then the situation is reversed. It's Plaid Cymru here and Reform UK topping those other seats. Notice we haven't seen any sign of red for Labour, who have dominated Welsh politics for so long. We have to go all the way down to see who came third in these constituencies before we start seeing the red of Labour. And it includes some of their heartland seats in the South Wales valleys. Afan Ogwr Rhondda, for example, on the notional results last time around, this would have been the safest Labour seat in Wales. If we took the results from 5 years ago, poured them into these new constituencies and the new proportional voting system, Labour could have won 4 seats in this constituency. Instead, it's won just 1 seat. And the amount of red on this map and the comparative lack of red in our virtual Senedd tells you that this has been a catastrophically bad election for Welsh Labour.
David, thank you very much indeed for that. Let's bring in Anne McElvoy, Executive Editor of Politico and co-host of Politics at Sam and Anne's. Good to have you with us, Anne. Maybe we could just focus on one element we've not discussed so far, and that is how people have voted according to how they voted at the EU referendum, at the Brexit referendum. Let's just have a quick look at English councils. We'll put this on the screen for our viewers. How Leave wards voted at this election, and you'll see that actually Reform have done very well in Leave constituencies, in Leave wards up and down the country, but also in Remain areas, up 11%, up 13%, along with the Greens who are up in those wards. What do you make of that, Anne?
Well, I make of it that there's still a very clear Brexit long tail that drives Reform forwards, because the first of those 2 statistics is really the motor of that Nigel Farage success. On the second one, yes, that's quite a substantial number of people, but, you know, that would put Reform in a slightly more difficult position when it comes to the general election. And it's always hard to read across between local results and what happens a couple of years later. But it is certainly, I think, a challenge to Keir Starmer. One of his big themes is reconnecting with the EU and his general pro-Europeanism, because it is certainly true that you can build a bit of a progressive Labour, plus if you're appealing to Lib Dems and maybe the more moderate end of the Greens saying, oh, I would really like to say sorry for Brexit and move on and move closer to the EU. But you are going to leave quite a lot of voters behind if you do that. And I think this is something we'll hear how that is phrased by the Prime Minister in his speech, if you like, his recovery speech, which is being planned for Monday. Personally, I've also had doubts about the Brexit narrative, because people will tend to sort of say, generally, I'm not very happy. I don't think Brexit has really brought us many gains. There are lots of problems with it. All true. But then when you contrast that with what they actually do, as opposed to what they say, tell a pollster or grumble about, you actually find, as you say, this quite nuanced picture, that it still drives some positive voting behaviour for Reform, but it's not necessarily as negative as you might think for others.
Yeah, I suppose the other thing to mention is that the party that delivered Brexit, the Conservatives, are no more popular among Leave voters than they are with Remain voters. Just talk to me about the Lib Dems. We're looking at the scoreboard here, plus 97. I mean, it should be remembered that the Liberal Democrats regularly do better in local general elections. They tend to just steadily plod forwards. But should they be doing better than that, given the problems for the 2 bigger traditional parties?
You could certainly make that argument. I think there's slowly a conversation building up about Davey, the leadership. Have they had him long enough? Have they got what they can get out of it? Remember, they have a sizable number of MPs since the last election.
Only
so
2
I think
council gains, though, Anne, only 2.
Yes, they do. They do have gains. And as we saw, I think what's very interesting battlefields now we can see it's going to go forward is Lib Dems versus Greens. And it is also true that in Richmond, with a big Green push there, but still Southwest London, you remember it was Vince Cable's old stomping ground. Lib Dems, when dug in, have a very, very good ground game and a are hard to dig out. You could say they could have made more progress here. You could also say that for the Greens. On the other hand, I just happened to be listening to two Green councillors chatting here in London and not realising, political journalists, listening in. We're just, they were over the moon that they've made such gains from, when you think about it, a party that wasn't really nationally present.
And the mayor. They've got Zoe Garvin in Hackney as well.
That is that's a tense field between those
I mean,
two.
obviously, there's still a lot of counting to go on in London. Just on the Zach Polanski issue, there was a question mark. His approval rating in one of the last polls before the vote collapsed. Do you think he put a cap on some of the gains the Greens might have hoped to realise?
I think we won't, it's always a hard one, isn't it? It's a bit of a counterfactual. If Zach Polanski framed his message in a more certain way on anti-Semitism, would that, well, there's some voters, hard to say, you'd have to go on and do the field work on that. Did they think, actually, I'll stick with the Lib Dems or might even stick with Labour? Clearly not that many of them sticking with Labour. But I think that is a question the Greens should answer about what's their general approach to this question that is coming to define them. I think what is certainly true is that you've got voter behaviour is a bit resistant to some of the media narrative, I should say, in fairness and all modesty. They're just, whatever questions you ask me, whatever I answer, if they're thinking I'm in a place, like we say, Hackney, I should give the Greens due credit. Yeah, they've swept to a fantastic result. So I think it's much more, are you in a place where you've got the right demographics, they've changed their mind, and then
if you're in the right council. And I'm going to have to draw it there. We're up against it. Anne McElvoy, thank you very much. My thanks also to Vicky. Do stay with us. Coming up next on the BBC One is the News at 6 with Sophie Rayworth.